We'll do a roll call at 7 o'clock, but we're starting with a study session for a presentation on the 2411 project, and we have a bunch of material that Leon Cohen has provided to us. Rich, do you want to say anything to start this off?
Yes, please.
Sorry, I didn't mean to catch you with your mouth.
Mid-cookie, yeah. Thank you. Tonight you're going to get a presentation from Leon Cohen and his associates regarding the 2411 project. If you go back a few years, you'll remember that the city initiated a consultant selection process to look at a potential transit-oriented development in our town center on a number of properties. And we actually evaluated 4 or 5 properties, selected one. At the time it was the current Walgreens site, to assess whether or not a TOD project could go there. We tried to play matchmaker between the property owner and the developer, which we did. They went into a long set of discussions lasting well over a year, and ultimately they did not conclude with an agreement. So we are now in 2013. The need for additional parking capacity in the town center for commuters still exists. Leon, throughout all that process, was an eager and interested potential developer. He has a site. So when he came to me this year and said, can I propose a project? I said, absolutely. Pull together your proposal. We'll talk about the connection with Sound Transit and the parking capacity, and we'll see where we go from there. The key decision point, should the council decide to look into this further, is the property that this project would be built on is half owned by Leon and half owned by the city of Mercer Island. It's the green space. Our portion is the green space on the corner Southeast 24th and 76th Avenue Southeast. We received it in title from the state of Washington after the construction of the I-90 freeway in what we call the turnback agreement. It's land that we have ownership of, but its only allowed use, at least it was when we received it, is as green space. It's one of the few pieces of green space in the corridor that was turned back to us that does not carry with it federal restrictions on use. It's some arcane federal rule called Section 4F. I won't go into any more detail because it doesn't apply in this case, but it's fairly rare within the corridor. So based on that, a year ago I sent a letter to the Department of Transportation asking that if we could sell it for some other use, and they, I was surprised, said yes, that it didn't have the 4F status, and that the only stipulation would be that if we did sell it for some other use, it would have to be sold at an appraised value, and that all the proceeds of the sale would go to the state of Washington to the Highway Trust Fund. So that would be the decision point that the council has. Do we sell the property or not? I'll stop now because Leon and your team, you can propose what it is that we're talking about here.
Well, thank you, Rich.
So, Leon, what I'd ask is if you can make your presentation, make sure you leave at least 20+ minutes or so for the council to ask any questions. So we'll let you get through your entire presentation before we start asking questions. Okay? Yes,
I think there's a few that might want to make a 3-minute or less appearance if that's appropriate also.
It's up to you how you want to use your time.
Okay.
Okay. But there will be an opportunity at 7 o'clock for people to make appearances also. So I'll leave it up to you how you want to use your time.
Oh, I see. They can do it then as well. I see.
At 7 o'clock, it's open for public appearances.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Dan and Rich and the council for having us in. I've been involved with the project, the property about 4.5 years, and we've gone through some different scenarios, and I think we've come up with one that makes a lot of sense for the community, for the city. So what I'm prepared to do is go through some community benefits and city benefits, and At the end of this, I have a letter of intent that I can just leave with you for your review. And I've sent you copies of, I think, of all this. I believe Ally sent them out to you. Okay. I want to start by saying our project director, William Justin, with the Justin Company, is in Italy on a bike tour, so he's not with us tonight, and he was supposed to be here, but that took precedence. Also, another one that was going to be here was Bryce Caldwell with Freshies Fish. He's eyeing a new location and is very excited about it. But I'll start by stating some of the community benefits for the proposed mixed-use development at 2411. And we're calling the project 2411. That's the address, and so we refer to it as that. The commuters using Sound Transit would have access to 100 underground commuter parking stalls on the northwest side of the town center across 24th from Aubrey Davis Park, and less than 100 yards to the westbound I-90 ramp. The location of the public park and ride at 2411 will reduce the amount of traffic passing through the core area of town center, alleviating congestion and carbon emissions in town center. This commuter parking will be within walking distance or approximately 300 yards from the new Sound Rail Light Transit station or bus station, making it convenient to catch the rail or bus from 2411. The community would gain an attractive new mixed-use building with all parking below grade. This would strengthen the north gateway to town center. The present visual condition of the site, including the old gas station, does not provide an aesthetic northwest entrance and gateway cornerstone into town center. Convenient retail and commercial for the commuters and nearby residents will surround public plazas included in this development. The new retail will complement the shopping at Aviera and West Mercer, the new West Mercer Phase 2 and Legacy projects, all on the west side of town center and all along 76th Avenue, creating quite a shopping corridor. I think there might be up to 50,000 feet of commercial and retail if you add it all up together. The proposed development site, which is a private ownership and the site of a former gas station, has contaminated soils, which will be cleaned up during excavation of the site for below-grade parking. The project will provide several affordable housing units in order to qualify for a fifth-story height bonus. In keeping with Mercer Island's comprehensive plan, 2411 will compel folks to come into town center. And 2411 will be a first-class building, including 45 to 50 luxury large apartment units, living units, and there will be a couple notches above the other units in town center. In addition, we'll have 20 to 25,000 square feet of commercial and retail. Some of the features will include air conditioning, nice views, lakes views, park views, large outdoor lanais, inside unit laundry rooms, water features, and 3 fast elevators and more. 2411 will deliver a luxury as well as a recreational feel, being just across the street from Aubrey Davis Park and the linear parks, including many bike trails and dog walks. Those were the community benefits that I saw, and some of them overlap a little bit, but now I'll go on to the city benefits from the city as I see it. The city would own 100 underground commuter parking stalls with little out-of-pocket expense, using some of Sound Transit's mitigation funds to purchase the much-needed parking. The commuter parking will be within walking distance, approximately 300 yards, from the new Sound Transit Light Rail Mercer Island Station and across the street from 2 major bus lines that exist now. The city would gain an aesthetically pleasing building that would strengthen the north gateway of town center. The present visual condition of the site does not provide an aesthetic entrance to the gateway cornerstone into town center. Convenient retail commercial space for the commuters will include elegant water features inside the development. This new commercial area will complete the shopping at the Aviera and Legacy projects on the northwest side of town center. The proposed development site includes a relatively small leftover piece of I-90 right-of-way, which currently generates no tax and generates ongoing maintenance expenses to the city. The proposed development site, which is a private ownership and the site of a former gas station, has contaminated soils and is identified by the State of Washington Department of Ecology ID number 89773988, which will be cleaned up during the excavation of the site for the below-grade parking. The city would be supporting a project that would provide several affordable housing units in order to qualify for a fifth-story height bonus. There would also be financial benefits to the community. The Washington State sales tax from the construction of the project would total approximately $2.24 million, with the city portion being approximately $200,000 of it. The city permits would be approximately $600,000, and currently the property taxes on the private property are approximately $9,000 per year, and the city's portion being approximately $1,300 per year. With the new development on the full site, the overall property taxes would increase to approximately $300,000 per year, with the city's portion being approximately $40,000 per year. I was hoping in talking that we could open this up a little bit to a dialogue of some kind where we can both learn from your views and learn more about the project. I really realize there's not going to be any kind of voting or anything like that this evening. I understand that, but I just thought it might be a good opportunity to field questions and answers, and maybe I'll introduce my architect first. Our architect, project architect, and principal of McCanaham Architects, Mark Gleason, and he can go through some of the architectural
just for
drawings.
And I don't want to discourage you from doing that, but I should point out that under our city structure, ultimately that would go to the design commission. So the city council itself really doesn't get into the nuances of the design, and so not that some people in the council may be interested in that, but at the end of the day, we don't really get into that level of detail. What we will need to decide tonight is whether to ask staff to continue working with you on seeing whether something can be further developed on this, and then ultimately come back to the council with a more detailed proposal. So I think what's important now to focus on first any questions the council has, and also to focus on really how you envision the parking working, and without saying any specifics on what the financial arrangements in general you'd expect to have with the city in terms of the sound transit money, and would it be completely dedicated parking, or would it be shared use parking, or those kinds of information. Sure. That would be helpful to walk us through some of that.
Sure. We've denoted on one of the drawings the parking that we're talking about, so that might be an appropriate plate to put up. But the red draw, but Mark will go through that with you.
Okay. Mark,
thank you.
So I assume I need to take the mic with me to...
Yes, please.
For the record. I'll be real brief then about the design, and we'll jump right into the parking. Basically, this is all within city development standards, 5-story building, 65-foot maximum height. It's using affordable housing to gain that extra floor without getting into the detail of that, but that's what's represented in the piece that you see here. I think one of the things to point out, to go along with some of the city and community benefits, is that if you're familiar with this site at all, the property essentially is this triangular piece to the side. This is the portion that's the right-of-way. And trying to develop a site of that with that narrow dimension is rather difficult and problematic. I think it has the development potential, but it's certainly increased, especially on the edge of your town center and the intent of the comprehensive plan on this end of the site. So there's definitely a benefit to basically marry up the two triangular sites to create a larger rectangular portion. So basically the arrangement is 2 stories of a base. The first floor is commercial, second floor is a combination of residential and commercial. The remaining floors are all residential in nature. So 3 stories essentially of residential stacked on top of 2 stories of commercial and commercial residential. So it sounds like maybe the most important aspect of that is the parking. What is proposed right now is approximately 185 stalls, 3 different levels, 100 of which, the first 100 stalls, would be for community use, and the intent would be that would be, I think, I'll let you talk to the agreement portion of it, but utilized for commuter parking for whether it be the current park and ride or commuter stalls for ultimately the transit station that Sound Transit's putting together. And those first 100 stalls are noted here with the red dots as you go down into the parking level. And then the lower levels would be for commercial users and residents. As Leanne and I have worked through this, I think one of the details to talk through with staff and maybe with council is you know, the shared use aspect of that, since this is sort of a different kind of use. The city design codes allow for 20% of mixed use reduction, which I think this project would qualify for, but there should probably be discussion about when these stalls would be used and how they would best serve the city and the community in terms of, are they exclusively commuter stalls or are they somehow joint used between various uses within the city and maybe within the project as well. So these are the first 3 levels. The last level and third level is intended to be for the residents of the building, so there would be some sort of a security gate probably, but it would keep those 2 separate. Right now what is proposed are 2 different sets of vertical circulation, so elevators to get commuters up and onto the street and over to wherever their destination is, and then the other 2 remaining elevators for the residents themselves. This kind of gives you a sense of the section of that and how it all works together. So 76th Avenue Southeast here, 24th beyond, this is a section cut kind of east-west looking north. Kind of gives you an idea of the depth of the parking, how the commercial fronts the street, its relationship to the office building that's back on the upside of the hill here. I think I'll leave it at that and let you ask questions.
Talk about the relationships with Sound Transit and how that would...
Sure.
I just muttered to the mayor, I can talk a little bit about how Sound Transit could fit in what kinds of conversations we've had with them. I fully expect by the end of the year we will have an agreement with Sound Transit, a written agreement on resources to provide additional commuter spaces on Mercer Island in our town center in a TOD project. It won't be site-specific. It will be an agreement that stipulates sort of a scale. And right now we're talking about 180 parking stalls or up to that amount, and the dollars necessary to build that in a structured setting with maintenance dollars. 180 total commuter parking spaces.
So
and we got...
Could you split it between projects?
Sure.
Conceivably, yes.
Okay.
The 180 comes from, that's about what would be allowed or could be built at the Walgreens site on one floor. That's how we got there. This came up several years ago, and that's how we started the agreement, and that's kind of, that number has stuck. You'll see that, we'll bring it to the council, I think, in November. Sound Transit's interest is to provide to the city a total package of resources, and then what sort of their stipulations on those resources are. So there will be some rules attached to those dollars. For example, I am quite sure one of those rules will be it's commuter parking. It's not just general parking. They're not in that business. They legally couldn't do that, or by policy, they don't do that anywhere in the Sound Transit taxing district. It's going to be for commuters.
Meaning it's not Mercer Island specific parking.
That's the next rule. Nowhere in Sound Transit's taxing district do they have resident-only parking. Anybody can park in any Sound Transit space, and that will be part of this agreement.
Well, don't say, although there is some gray area recently with that Sammamish parking right, is there not?
The only gray area that I am aware of is a pilot project they're just starting up on charging for parking.
Right, so, I mean, that's better than...
Yeah, so, and they know that we might be interested in that, and so those conversations, I think, can and should occur. But I think going into this, you shouldn't assume they're going to give us a pot of dough to go just build parking and anybody can use it. Any Mercer Islander can use it, and we can't exclude everybody else. Right. So it is my understanding that they want to turn over these resources by agreement, and then as long as we live by those terms, we apply those dollars as we see fit. So they don't want to own the parking in the end. They don't want to manage it. They just want to govern its use through that initial agreement. So I would assume, based on that, that whatever project we apply this to, the relationship will be between the City of Mercer Island and the developer. Sound Transit will not be a direct party to that development. So we have some control, some latitude there, but it will be closely stipulated by Sound Transit. Another thing they have never done, as I understand it, never quite done before, is a shared parking arrangement with a private developer. Metro has done that, and the one that we always point to is Thornton Creek up at Northgate. And in part, that's why we picked Lorigan Associates to talk to the Walgreens site, because they'd actually done that with Metro. And so they had a history of being able to work this thing out so that everybody felt comfortable with how the parking structure was going to get utilized across a 24-hour day. Sound Transit hadn't done it, but they said they would keep their ears open. They'd listen. So when Leon suggests that there might be a shared parking agreement, there certainly is provisions for it within our own code between commercial uses and residential parking uses. We allow for that. Sound Transit and a private developer, I don't know. If that's just a subject to some discussions and negotiations. There's no guarantees that they'll say yes to that.
So who would own the parking places?
You know, it's a good question. I'm not sure I can guarantee the answer, but I'm guessing that would be us.
I have a point of order type of question.
Sure, Mike.
What are we deciding here? We're just deciding to sell that open space,
No, we're not making that decision tonight, because all we're doing now is deciding whether we want staff to pursue this with Leon and his company.
So when we say this project or this the selling of the open space?
Well, that would be part of it. So if council is interested in pursuing this project, there are a lot of discussions that would have to occur between staff and Leon and his company as a developer, and then because that's the whole financial arrangement, how would the parking be done? But there's a fundamental threshold question as to whether this is the project that we would be interested in pursuing in terms of commuter parking. Because that's what's being proposed right now, is eventually taking some of the Sound Transit money, applying it towards the parking in this project, and whether we want to do that. If we're not interested, you know, what Rich has not said yet is, or sort of alluded to, you know, we had this whole discussion with the Walgreen property that did not go anywhere. That may come back some year, but right now it's not a live project. We don't have any other live projects going on right now which are alternatives to this. I mean, council can say, you know, we're just not interested in this particular project, and so staff will continue to look at other opportunities. Or council will say tonight, you know, there's enough interest in this that we want staff to continue talking and come back to us with something more concrete. Because this is going to take a lot of activity on the part of council in terms of agreeing to sell the property, agreeing to do some sort of arrangement on the commuter parking. There's going to be issues, I think, regarding the comp plan on this piece of property, if I'm not mistaken. There's a whole bunch of dominoes that have to fall on this, but we need to make the decision here whether this is a project we want staff to put their time into and pursue. So that's really the question.
That is absolutely correct. If you were to say you were not interested in selling the property, then I would say we're done. If you were to say I'm maybe interested, I want to know more, you would send us off to continue conversations with Leon and with Sound Transit about the parking agreements. And if I were Leon, I wouldn't want to spend a lot more architect's time for now until the council gives a pretty strong indication of interest. Because, I mean, he's already spent quite a bit of time. You have a sense of what might get built there. But what's most important is, are you interested in being a partner? Or perhaps interested in being a partner? I don't think you're at tonight, certainly you're not making decisions. You've got additional time to think about this and give direction, but not a lot more. I think you got to make a threshold sense of I'm warm, I'm lukewarm, I'm hot, or I'm just stone cold pretty quickly, because people have already invested enough to get it to this kind of proposal point, and it's going to take some work with Sound Transit, frankly.
Debbie, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a lot of questions. I'm not sure all of them can be answered tonight, but I think that's the nature of the game. You know, for me, obviously, the community's quite excited to have more transit parking. I think, obviously, we'd also love to have it be Mercer Island only, but under the scheme, that's not an option. So, Rich, you mentioned that the current plan with Sound Transit is for 180 stalls. Up to. So this design is for 100. How do we apportion money to parking stalls to project, first of all? And then second, just clarifying what I understood from Dan, in that there are no other active sites at this time.
Yeah, I'll modify that just slightly. We've had one other property owner indicate an interest. If we were interested in a proposal, I think he'd provide a proposal.
But that's as far as it's gone.
That's as far as it's gone. That's short of a conversation. And this is up to 180 stalls. I haven't had the conversation with Sound Transit on could we spread that over multiple sites. I believe the answer probably is yes. I would argue strongly that we could, given the past conversations, but I haven't had that yet. And what Leon is proposing is a project that would have 100 commuter stalls.
Mike, you had a question?
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation, gentlemen. I have a couple questions. Your first point here says the city would own 100 underground commuter parking stalls with little out-of-pocket expense, but I'm not clear how we would own that and how we would, quote, be a partner in this project.
What I intended by that,
Your microphone.
what I intended by that was to condominiumize the 100 stalls in a condominium, so that when you bought those, they would be yours in perpetuity. They would be yours, and we'd have to get into maintenance, of course, and reserve for replacements and things like that. It's like Dan mentioned, there's a lot of working parts that we have to go through. I have talked a little bit with Tom Fitzsimmons from Lorig, and I got some ideas on that agreement up at Thornton Creek parking. That could be something I'd like to hire a traffic engineer at the appropriate time. It's early now, but and work through that so that that reciprocal parking is figured out. And it can be, but we have to work through it.
Well, what I'm not understanding is, so we're going to contribute physical property to the project, as well as, it sounds like, hard cash.
No, sir. Excuse me for interrupting, but no. The purchase of the property would be based on market value, and that doesn't have anything to do with going toward equity in the 100 stalls. It's a separate transaction. As I understand it, as Rich has explained it, that we would get an appraisal for fair market value, and there's some guidelines that were in some of the packet that was sent out about that, and then that would be closed, and after there's a zoning issue that has to come up regarding the comprehensive plan, and I understand only one time a year it's opened up in June sometime. So
You have to docket issues, and then you approve them once a year, the Growth Management Act. So let's get back to the cost, though, because I feel like we're having a flyby here on this cost issue.
Okay, sure.
Because throughout your handout, you speak to how we're going to, quote, purchase 100 parking stalls. So if we're going to purchase a part of this building, my question is, how do we become a partner in the revenue that's created from the building itself? So, I'm all for looking at transit parking, but quite frankly, I'm also looking at what's the quid pro quo for the public. If we're going to invest public dollars in a private enterprise, I need to have some understanding of what revenue stream is going to come our way as being a partner in this project.
Well, I don't know exactly how Rich was intending it, but what I do know is that if we do meets and bounds and design a condominium for the 100 stalls and transfer them to the city would own them.
We would own the condominiums?
You would own the 100 units.
Condominium, let me try to clarify that. Just
Can I just
but we're confusing
listen to what
terms.
the answer is?
We're confusing, condominium is a confusing term with the way
I'm sorry,
Leon used
I'm
it.
sorry.
You're thinking of the residential units. He's
No,
talking,
I'm tracking. Thank you.
The 100 units would be one condominium, and they would transfer for $1 that was agreed on at a later date. We'd get into values and agree on a dollar amount. So now you would own that 100 unit.
Right.
That would be yours.
Yeah, Leon, I think where Mike is going, he's looking for a part.
Rich, if I could finish, that would be nice. Thank you. So then a follow-up to that is then what financial interest do we have in wanting to share those 100 stalls with you if we just own them free and clear?
What I put in there is that in trade for reciprocal usage, according to an agreement that hasn't been drafted, we could maintain the day-to-day maintenance with any of the reserve replacements or renovations would be your expense, but I mean the day-to-day maintenance we could take care of, like we could take care of it. And that's one of my items in here, but that has to be that has to flourish. We've got to discuss it, and it's something that we can get into as much detail as you like. But
Yeah, we would need to. So then what would be the total project cost?
I don't have the total project
Roughly.
cost for you. You mean of the entire
Yes.
project? About $45 million.
45 million. Okay, so, and of the 45, how much would the city contribute and how much would the developer
I
contribute?
don't have those numbers tonight, but there's a per stall amount that we're working on and we can have for you.
Roughly, what would that be for 100 stalls?
For 100 stalls, it could be somewhere between $5 and $6 million.
Okay, thank you.
other questions? Dan, go ahead.
Thinking about the dividing up the parking, because I think as Councilmember Bertland said, providing parking for our community is probably one of the most desired outcomes that the council could decide on right now. But given that we have 180 stall amount of money to work with, and we're talking about using 100, I guess this is less of a question to Leon, but how do you think this might preclude other developments from adding commuter parking if it's just limited to 80 stalls? And does there have to be a certain kind of threshold of stalls that it makes a project worthwhile? So, in other words, would there be other projects that would not be, would we be able to find another partner to fulfill the rest of the 80 stalls? It's my main question.
And if are you asking?
Planning.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
I don't know. It certainly is easier when you can aggregate the resource into a project. So I think that's a really fair question. I'm trying to think of the other sites that might be in play. I think a lot of what affects is sort of what's the building footprint, what are the shapes of the sites, and how many parking stalls can you get on a floor, because I think that's how these things actually get done. And it might work, but I just couldn't tell. I can't tell you right now, doing 100 now means we walk away from the value of 80 stalls, but I also can't tell you that I've got an easy solution to how do we place another 80 somewhere else.
Okay, thank you.
Debbie, another question?
I think Leon
Leon?
Okay, I don't know if this is feasible right now, but if we went down another story, we could get another 86 stalls, but the cost of that extra going down is very expensive, and I don't know if Sound Transit says we'll give you so much money based on so much a stall, if they have a formula, or if they say we've got a total of 8 million or whatever the number is. I think it's public, whatever the number is, but I don't know if they have a lump sum number and you can do what you want with it up to that, or whether they say you can't spend more than this on each stall.
I think they're going to provide us with a lump sum amount based on a calculation that is sensible. And to be honest, at 5 to 6 million for 100 stalls, they would advise us not to build those stalls, I'm sure, because they haven't built them at that price. That's not how, that's above the level that they cost out a structured parking stall.
If you compare your above-grade parking to
No,
that...
this is at underground.
Oh, underground?
At a structured parking. I know they're more expensive, but it's not, I don't think they would say it's that expensive.
Well, I'm just kind of caught, I didn't realize I was going to be reporting on Dalton.
And you're not. We've got a lot more homework to do.
And I think the last thing the council should be looking at is specific numbers tonight. I mean, that's why it's a conceptual decision that's before the council right now, very, very conceptual decision of whether this is a project we want staff to work on pursuing and come back to the council, and then there'll be more decisions that would have to be made by the council. So, Mike, you had a question?
Actually, I have a quick question. Is that depiction right there, is that is that 4 or 5 stories?
5
It's
stories.
5 stories, yeah.
In that one right there?
Yes.
Yeah. The first one is a little bit deceiving for the reason that it's a 2-story podium.
That's all I have, and if I can reserve for statement time.
Sure. Jane?
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Cohen. I read somewhere that the total property was appraised recently at $966,700. Is that anywhere?
Are you talking about the piece that I have?
No, the entire piece.
Oh.
And that that's what I saw a report that said that the green space, the quarter-acre green space turnback property is appraised at
It was in the agenda. It was in the agenda, wasn't it? Because I saw that number too.
$797,000.
Right, it's in the agenda.
No, I did not put that in the agenda. There isn't an appraisal of that green space that's anything recent. The only time that might have happened is that we had talked a year ago, and again, this was at a project Leon was considering with U Theater Northwest. That's what prompted the question about could we sell the property, and that's when the state said yes, but with an appraisal, and so we knew that was the process, but nobody has done an appraisal.
Okay.
So I don't know what it's worth. For sure, I saw one.
May I
But again, we
speak
don't
to-
get any of the money anyway, so.
No, I know that, but I'm just trying to look at relative.
But also just to, because Mike, in one of his questions, was referring to this, just to make sure everyone's clear on this, that as I understand it, Leon is not asking the city to donate the property. He's,
Oh, no, I know.
part of his proposal is to pay for the property.
Of course. A little bit from what you said. Right now, it's not a lot. It's a piece of earth, but it's not a lot. It's just a piece of right-of-way. So, to my knowledge, there's not a value, like Rich said, there's not a value right now. One thing we would have to do is, according to the state request, is to get an appraised value for the market value, and that would be a meets and bounds, and they would have to turn it into a lot and then figure out how much it's worth based on what it is today.
Debbie?
A couple of things. First, I'd say, we need to be cautious about saying it has value or it doesn't have value. I think it depends on what a person's perception, what it's being compared to, et cetera, because there are some people, I think, who appreciate that green spot on that green corner, so I think we just need to be a little careful there. My main question centers around what would probably be split to the two of you, and that is, it comes into the entrance for the commuter parking. Is that on 24th? Is that on the main avenue there? 76th. And is that intersection, as it currently stands, capable of handling the traffic flow that would come in and out? So I guess I'm dividing the question. The final point actually I want to raise real quickly is, we've said that by law, by process, by procedure, whatever that property is sold for has to go back to the state. Is that potentially negotiable? I mean, we are having a number of discussions with our state transportation organizations, plural, about tolling, middle lane, et cetera. I think I'd like to at least explore whether or not that could come back into some form of island funding.
Haven't asked the question, so I don't know the answer. What we do know is the State Department of Transportation acquired the property using federal transportation dollars, and that's ultimately, I think, who's getting reimbursed. Yeah.
And I'll just add in as part of the deed that it does require that it be turned back to the state. So.
Okay, so we have only about 15 minutes left to go through this, so I would like to get a sense of where the council...
Parking question answered?
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, where's the entrance to the...
Oh, the entrance is on 76th, not 24th, and if you see the white car perpendicular to the building, you will see the white car there that is going into the building. It's at the south end of the building, and it kind of goes down.
So next to Aviara.
Right next to Alviara's entrance.
Exactly.
Okay, and then the question, I believe the second question is the impact on the corner, and that's, that if I understand it, Leon, as part of the environmental review, would have to do the transportation study, and then the city would have to advise whether it would be necessary to put a light at the corner or some other traffic control device in order to address the, or even putting a light at the, at the entrance to the parking garage, or, I mean, that's what a transportation study would require. Staff would review that, and then they go from there.
It's not next to Aviara, it's next to the parking garage for Island Corporate Building.
Okay,
It's
right.
in from the corner, maybe 75 or 80 feet.
Dan's description of the process is accurate, though. Those issues would get resolved through a traffic study and a staff review.
We would have.
Okay, so we have about 15 minutes left. I'd like to get a, and again, the only question before the council tonight is whether this project has enough interest on the part of the council to merit asking staff to spend more time working with Leon to come back to the council essentially with a more developed approach to the commuter parking issue. And again, we're not talking about what the project looks like. We're not talking about affordable housing. We're not talking about any of that. We're talking about this is a commuter parking, potential commuter parking project in which the city would have to use some of its housing transit funds and ultimately agree to sell this property to to Leon as part of the project.
A sense of the timing here, too. I would not advise you to give us any direction that would bind us to going forward on this project till we have a written agreement with Sound Transit.
Right, great.
And that's going to happen in November. We're going to bring it to you. I think what I've seen so far is pretty good, but there's a couple challenges in it that's going to get your attention. So I don't know if it's, you can spend some time on it, I think.
Okay.
So, yeah, Rich, and specifically the 4F issue, because I don't know that I would characterize 4F as arcane, but
Federal Register.
it was put together for a good reason,
Yeah.
so I think some more eyes on that would be helpful.
Okay. Mike, you wanted to say something?
Sure, I'll start with my statement, or the water temperature on this is, if the question is, would I approve or do I approve of selling the open space area, I say yes. I'm sure I support the staff exploring selling the open space area, which, by the way, Councilmember Braun, it's in the patch for $979,000. That's where you saw it.
Okay.
I don't know where you got that. There's only one place you could get that number, and that would be from the city.
Well, King County Records, I'm sure.
Whatever.
But
Oh, okay. I didn't
But I
remember.
want to make sure you understand what my endorsement is. My endorsement is to sell it to the highest bidder. If you happen to be that highest bidder, then good for you. I would not infer any type of quid pro quo on what you've presented to us here. Obviously, there are a lot of questions. I think that's a completely different discussion that we have. And, you're a businessman, you're in the business of risk return. I would say there's significant risk in knowing at least what this council member would agree to on a building, given my record with Legacy, with the exemptions that were made with Legacy. You would be accepting significant risk in assumption with what we've seen here. Is that clear?
Not so clear.
I think what you're saying.
That again for me?
Well, I'll say it real quickly.
Sure.
I'm all for staff direction of selling the open space with potentially a TOD development. But there's significant risk. This council member was not amenable to the legacy exemption, which I'm sure you're from, and I would not, as a businessman, the record of the legacy. I think our citizens are kind of said, what's going on? I would not assume the exemptions for legacy would flip over to this project.
Okay. Okay. Tana?
Thank you.
I too am supportive of exploring this further. I think, again, any effort, any real effort and realistic opportunity to add parking for commuters in advance of light rail coming, or even without light rail coming, I think is something that we need to explore. I think that what's also important, while, again, we're not here to discuss this, I do think it is a true corner that welcomes people into our city. And so I think that that corner and any development there would have to reflect the values and the style of welcoming people into Mercer Island, and would just, encourage you to keep that in mind as you go forward, as truly, if this is the first view of Mercer Island, what does that mean to welcome people here? And I think to Councilmember Ciro's point, is kind of questioning that fifth story, is that too high of a ceiling as you're coming into the center. So I think that's what he's saying. But not to put words into his mouth, again, I do support exploring further, because I think parking is undoubtedly the biggest issue on our island.
Jane?
Well, I concur that parking is the big issue. And I love seeing a project that brings in commuter parking. I just don't think this is the spot. And I will remind the council that about 3 years ago, when we first started talking about a transit-oriented development using Sound Transit funds, we had 5 projects then. This site was the lowest in the priority. Since then, 1 or 2 have gone away, but I still believe that this is the lowest and least suitable parcel for providing the commuter parking that we're looking for. I also guess I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and I don't think it's such an aesthetically unpleasing corner. I like the trees and the green space. I am very cold on this project.
I'm going to support that we move forward. A couple comments is, to me, I specifically asked if there were other projects in the pipeline, because again, I think when you have limited funds, huge demand for parking, we need to make sure we're spending our money the most effective possible way. So what I would encourage the city staff to do is to make sure whoever you had the very short conversation with understands that council has a decision before them. And no disrespect, Mr. Cohen, but I think you would pursue the same competitive strategies that we would be here. So we'll make sure, A, that there's nobody else out there who's not potentially equally attracted. And then the final point that I would comment here again is on the aesthetics. There is such a stark contrast between having a 5-story building and the park across the street and hopefully a couple topiary deer, et cetera. So let's make sure that, you know, when we do move forward, if we do move forward, that it's in line with the aesthetics of a gateway to the community.
Definitely.
So my biggest focus is going to be, let's maximize our commuter parking dollars here on the island.
Mike?
This reminds me of a discussion the state of California was having about high-speed rail going from San Francisco down to Los Angeles. And the knee-jerk reaction on the part of US DOT was, let's build a huge infrastructure project at the tune of over $6+ billion. The response on the part of a businessman, who you may be familiar with, was, I could do that for much less and move people and goods much quicker in a different way. What I'm getting at is $6 million for 100 parking stalls is a lot of money. Matter of fact, it would eat up just about all the Sound Transit's pocketbook that they plan to give to us. There are a lot cheaper alternatives to move people and goods to the north end, particularly to the Parker ride and eventually to our light rail. There are many that are in the works now with many auto manufacturers that involve automated self-driving cars. So by the time this project would come online, we could have a bank of 50 self-driving cars on the south end of Mercer Island, and many in the audience, or a few, are very familiar with the ability to move people and goods using self-driven electric cars from the south end to the north end. So for 1/10 the cost that it would cost us to buy 100 stalls, we could buy a bank of cars that people could access any time of the day they want and get them to and from the south end to the north end. So I can't support this because I know there are technologies out there that are cheaper and more reliable, and the less, quite frankly, parking we have, the better, because my goal is to get people out of their cars and get them walking, biking, or taking alternative forms of transportation that aren't using fossil fuels. Thank you, though, for your presentation.
So I am going to support staff continuing to work with Leon to pursue this project. I don't know where it's going to come out, but just in response to some of the comments, first, I think that whoever owns the old Union 76 property is the only person who would be interested in buying that corner property, because the only way you can make anything out of that property from a development standpoint, if in fact you want to develop the property, is to put the two of them together. Having said that, I fully appreciate what Debbie said, that some people might say there's no reason to develop that corner, and I respect that opinion, but I see it as a viable option for commuter parking. Right now, we don't have any other options out there. I would hope that if we are able to pursue this with Sound Transit, we could do something similar to what is being done up in Sammamish, which would effectively ensure that this became, that Islanders would have a financial priority for these spaces. I think there's an opportunity to work that into this process. I do agree with Tana on the ultimate aesthetics of the property. While it is within the purview of the Design Commission, I think that when you do come back to the council again, you have to be cognizant of that this is, as you presented it, the gateway to the city, and the gateway may not want to look like that, but you need to think about that as to what, if you want to present this as a gateway to the city, then present it as the gateway to the city. So, but the bottom line is that I am prepared to have staff continue to talk with you and see what comes out of this. As Rich says, we first need to get an agreement with Sound Transit. I also agree with what Mike Grady said to the extent of, $6 million would be probably much more than we're prepared to throw into this project. But again, I don't know how much Rich is going to end up with. I don't know how much that you ultimately will need to make this pencil out. But I fully support the notion we need more commuter parking. Hopefully we can get this in a way which primarily, if not exclusively, benefits Islanders. And so I would support going forward. As I interpret the comments, there are 4 people on the council who have said that staff can go forward with this in their discussions, and 2 have said no. So at that point, that means that those discussions can go forward.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
I certainly hear that 4 are interested in staff continuing to work with Leon on this project. I also heard 1 council member urge us to go talk to the other potential sites, and there are conceivably 3. I guess I would like to know whether or not that's the direction you want me to pursue, because if I do, any one of them could say, yeah, you need to give me a month to pull the proposal together so I can propose it. So, I mean, I don't know, I'm just making up a timeline, but Leon is proposing here, he wants to move forward as soon as he can. I am perfectly willing to go out and talk to others, but I only heard that from one place. If you would like me to do that, give me that direction.
Yeah, I don't feel pressured with time. I don't feel that time is, I feel time is on our side, and if there are other alternatives, to include what Councilmember Grady talked about, I mean, that's some pretty gee-whiz stuff, but if it works, so your 3 options, and then possibly Councilmember Grady's is a 4th option.
Yeah, I mean, it's, that we need to have 4 votes to go forward, and if that's, since Mike was one of the 4 votes, then that's where we stand at this point, that you need to look at the...
Check in with the other owners.
You need to check in with the other owners and see what they say, and I don't, I guess in deference to what Mike Grady said, you should at least find out from Sound Transit whether that would be something they would even consider using that money for, and I have no idea what the answer to that question is.
I'd love to hear Mike's advocacy in a different transit service direction, maybe not so much capital, because I agree, and I've got another idea on that too. I'll talk to you about it. And it's not Sound Transit, so.
Okay.
I have a question for Rich. In the agreement with Sound Transit, can it include purchase of property for parking?
That has not been mentioned yet, so that would be a new item that is not in their proposal right now.
If the city were to purchase Leon's portion of that lot, and we could build our own, use the rest of the Sound Transit money to build underground parking.
I think Sound Transit.
And keep a green space on top.
It'd be probably unwise to put too many words in their mouth, but if I were them, I would probably say, city, we'd be behind you all the way. You want to buy that piece of property, we'll help you build parking. They do parking. So I think they actually want us to drive this project. So we need to find a site and a developer. And when we've got that, then they'll have the resources to help support it.
Okay, so at this point, the staff will continue discussing this with you, but we'll also be looking at we're looking at what other options are out there, and see whether any of the other owners have anything concrete to propose, and we'll be talking with Sound Transit, so there'll be further discussions. Yeah, Leah?
Wasn't, when Ben Mercer did his request for proposals, there were five different properties. Wasn't that what you already did? But are you going back and going to?
No, I don't think, I think that was at a very sort of basic level, and, I think since that time, obviously the Walgreens site has evolved. I don't know whether Rich is going to go back to the O'Shea family and talk to them. And then I think I know who the other developer is, but that's, the point is that right now, in order for staff to continue discussing it, Rich has direction, he needs to talk to the other people, so he needs to do that. So that's the condition for proceeding on with discussing with you, is to also talk with other people to see whether there's anyone else out there. So that's the staff that's the council direction. Okay, I'm not sure. I think it's 7 o'clock now. I think we need to bring this study session to an end.
Okay.
As I said, there are appearances, and anyone who would like to talk about this project or anything else will have an opportunity to talk during appearances. So we're going to take 5 minutes, and then we'll start the regular council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Okay. So I'm going to call the meeting back to order. We have just completed a study session involving something referred to as the 2411 project, which, and we're now going to the regular meeting. So Ally, if you can call the roll.
Councilmember Debbie Bertlin. Here. Councilmember Jane Braum.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Cerro.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Grady.
Here.
Mayor Bruce Bassett. Councilmember Thomas Senn.
Here.
Sorry. Deputy Mayor Dan Grouse.
Here. So, do you have the resolution? The resolution, I don't know what I just did. Thank you. Great, thank you. We're going to start off with a proclamation. And although there originally was, as I understand from Cindy Goodwin, there was going to be someone speaking to it, I'm going to say a couple words before I read the proclamation. I think all of us who saw the newspaper on Sunday and read the story of the two people who were stabbed down near Pioneer Square after the Sounders game on Friday night could not help but be really horror-stricken by that. Personally, for myself, my wife and I actually walked through that same intersection about 15 minutes before those people were attacked. And it apparently, according to reports at least, there was a mental capacity issue with the attacker. The person had no relationship whatsoever with the person who was killed or the other woman who was injured, and basically walked up to them and started stabbing them just out of the blue. So so when I saw this proclamation and thought of that story, it really is a very timely proclamation. So whereas mental and substance use disorders affect all communities nationwide, but with commitment and support, people with these disorders can achieve healthy lifestyles and lead rewarding lives in recovery. Whereas nationally in 2011, 3.8 million people aged 12 and older received specialty treatment for an illicit drug or alcohol use problems in the past year, and more than 31.6 million adults aged 18 or older received mental health services in the past year. Whereas by seeking help, people who experience mental and or substance use disorders can embark on a new path towards improved health and overall wellness. Whereas Recovery Month spreads the message that behavioral health is an essential part of one's overall health and wellness. Prevention works, treatment is effective, and people do recover. Whereas through Recovery Month, people become more aware and able to recognize the signs of mental and or substance use disorders, which can lead more people into needed treatment. Whereas managing the effects of these conditions can help people achieve healthy lifestyles, both physically and emotionally. And whereas for 40 years, the City of Mercer Island's Youth and Family Services Department has supported the same goals as Recovery Month by working to improve the lives of Mercer Island residents affected by mental and or substance use disorders, by raising awareness of these diseases and educating the community about the prevention, treatment, and recovery resources that are available. Now, therefore, I, Dan Grouse, Deputy Mayor of the City of Mercer Island, Washington, along with 8 other East Side cities, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2013 as National Recovery Month, and call upon our community to support this year's observance and recognize ongoing efforts by the Mercer Island Youth and Family Services Department's mental health and substance abuse professionals, and by the Communities That Care Coalition project to prevent and treat mental and substance use disorders. So, going on, the next item on our agenda is appearances. I won't go through the specific rules. I think all of you know them. This is 3 minutes to address the council on any topic that you would like to bring to the council's attention. And all we ask is that you just provide your name and address. Anyone who would like to address the council?
Excuse me, my name is Jerome Shulkin. I have lived on the island for 55 years. I have practiced law in the Seattle area and Mercer Island area, which I am currently practicing on, for 57 years. And I actually practiced for 5 years in the corporate center, so I'm really very familiar with that piece of property. My practice extends to clear around the state and nationally, and much of it in this area. Although I haven't appeared before here, but I appreciate very much the opportunity. I heard about it, and I felt that perhaps I could add something from someone who's been around in that area for a long period of time. The beauty of the island is very important, and you have actually 2 park areas immediately adjacent there, and they're lovely properties, and for the benefit of the island, plus the fact that you have 3 excuse me, I was interrupting myself looking at the minute time. I'm just getting ready to go to Ellensburg, and I apologize for not being fully dressed. But it is very important. Parking is extremely important. I can't tell you whether you need 100 cars or provide 100 cars or not, but I do know this, that I am affected today by the ability to provide parking or make parking available for the clients who come not as commuters, but who come for business on the island, and they need parking. Fortunately, where I'm at right now, the Chase building provides some pretty good parking, but there's more and more of it needed. And the proximity to the areas that are available for daily commuters is extremely important. I think that's all I have to say now, but I encourage you and I appreciate very much the devotion you all have given to the city. That's a very important thing. So thank you for allowing me to appear before you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shulkin.
Thank you. I might, you asked for the address. I actually, my wife passed away. I live across from the Chase building as an apartment owner right now. But as I say, for over 50 years in actually 2 homes on the island.
That's fantastic.
And raised my family here. Thank you.
Thank you for everything you're doing.
Hi, my name's Ann Woodley, and I live on the south end on East Mercer Way, and I have some community that cares information here that I have had the pleasure of working with because of the work that Youth and Family Services has done, and I'm here to ask the council to be proactive about the marijuana shop discussion. I'm a licensed mental health professional and a parent on the island, and I think as we proceed ahead, none of us really know what this would bring, but we've spent a lot of money working on prevention. I'd like us to really take full opportunity to examine what having a marijuana shop here would be like. Do we have a choice? Is there a way to keep it out of here? Can we have public discussion of this topic? Can we look at the wisdom of the professionals on the island, like the police, Youth and Family Services, the parents, the school district, et cetera, et cetera? I'd like the city to take the idea of this business seriously and do a lot of legwork before we have something that is here. It's harder to get rid of something than it is to keep it from happening. I'd like you to be proactive. I'd like you to be aggressive. I think there's a lot of money to be made in this business, and I think as soon as it's allowed, someone will apply and open a shop here. I work with the south end of Seattle professionally, and when I drive to work, there have been 7 to 10 shops pop up in Rainier Avenue in the last 3 to 6 months, and the kids that I work with stand outside some of them and get products from people who have marijuana cards and are accessing them. And I'm not really doom and gloom. I just want to say that I think this is this needs our attention. We have had a problem here with kids and addiction. We have worked really hard on it. We have some of the best products available for parents here, and I'd like to see us be equally thorough in what we consider. And since I'm not a city council person, I'm here to ask for your help.
Thank you. What I will do is, it's not on our agenda tonight, so we can't discuss the issue. But the city manager and possibly the city attorney can at least, because I know several of us have received inquiries about this, at least so the city manager and the city attorney can publicly just explain where things stand with the state right now. And so at least you have that information, and then the people in the audience are watching also have the latest information. But we as a council can't discuss it tonight because it's not on our agenda.
I'm just sort of setting off red flare. That's my
But I think it's an important question. I think and we should get information out. Steve?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm Steve Marshall. I live at 8150 West Mercer Way. I'm here to encourage people to come tomorrow night to the State Senate Transportation Committee listening tour. They're going to be looking at about what to do with funding transportation. And of course, one of our issues is what do you do if you don't have tolls on I-90? And increasingly, it's looking like that's not going to happen as a matter of policy and as a matter of law. We've had our attorney here from Mercer Island, Bill Chapman, looking into it. We've had other people looking into it. And increasingly, it looks like it's not going to happen that you are allowed to have, by the federal government, money taken from a federal highway and put into a state roadway that's not funded properly, i.e. 520. So there's a need for what do you do for Plan B to fund 520. And part of the solution, and there are several of them that the state is looking into now under a proviso in the state transportation budget to look at alternatives. But one of the main alternatives is to look at a local gas tax option, a King County gas tax option that Cyrus Habib, Representative Habib, has introduced. Whatever we choose, there ought to be some way to continue to fund the projects that exist around King County that are not fully funded. And 520 is just one of them. We've got the replacement for the viaduct. We have 405. The list goes on, but they're mainly here in this state, in King County. The rest of the state is not likely to do too much to tax themselves for the purposes of roadways that serve most of us in King County. So I'm here to encourage not only you on the council, but anybody here in the audience, anybody that's listening, to show up and voice your opinion that, first of all, if the federal government doesn't allow this, what are we going to do? And second of all, there are some things that we can do to give ourselves a local option. So thank you very much, and we hope we can make this happen.
Thank you, Steve. Anybody else? Carve or go ahead.
Before I start, I'm not sure if my remarks should be now, or is there a provision to have
all remarks
after the
are
agenda?
now.
Okay, good. Well, my name is Pete Johnston. I live at 7930 Southeast 34th Street, directly opposite the thrift store. Lived there 8 years, 25 years on the island. I've seen the proposal for the improvement and enlargement of the thrift store and the various effects that will have on traffic and the park, Mercerdale Park, if these proposals are put into effect. I'm also a board member at Landmark Plaza Condominiums, but I'm speaking only for myself tonight. I am almost entirely in support of what's being proposed with respect to the enlargement and improvement of the thrift store, except for one aspect, which is the change that will be made on 78th Avenue, the main artery in and out of downtown, where it's proposed to cut the sidewalk about 100 feet or so north of the building on 78th Avenue, to put a driveway in there and make the pickup or the drop-off area be on the east side, the Landmark Plaza side of the building, instead of on the parking lot side. To my mind, this presents a problem. In fact, several problems. First of all, Mercerdale Park is being nibbled away piece by piece. The greenery is gradually diminishing as everyone with an interest seems to want to seize the greenery, to dig up greenery, to put down blacktop, to cut down mature trees, to move traffic from one side of the building to the other, to basically move the 34th Street traffic problem onto 78th Street, which that intersection is already quite entertaining. I happen to live right on the corner, and you know, I don't need TV or cable. I just need to look out there every day. It's lots of fun. At least it was lots of fun, you know, until my next door neighbor was killed there. And I see moving more traffic onto the 78th Street side as being a thoroughly bad idea, because it gets rid of Park and replaces it with blacktop. It puts traffic where there currently isn't any. The wall that's intended to be put between the play area and the proposed driveway will act as a sounding board and bounce traffic noise from 78th right back at our building. There's a whole bunch of other issues. I only have 16 seconds. Can't cover them all. But I urge you to take a look at least that. The other aspects of it I'm generally in support of, and I wish the thrift shop lots of success in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Paula Chester, and I live downstairs from Peter, and I second everything Peter said very eloquently. As soon as we looked at the proposal, our concern was that driveway and drop-off area right on 78th. But we support the thrift shop, and we've been talking about possible changes to the layout. And when both of us were at the meeting that was held at the thrift shop, the second meeting, we spoke to the architect afterwards, and we were hoping even today that he would have perhaps done a sketch of an alternative plan that would relocate that driveway and drop-off area. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Carr?
Carr Zwingle, 6250 East Mercer Way. I'm a little out of sequence here. I'm going to be traveling for quite a while, and I know this subject is going to come up later, and I just won't be here to get my 2 cents worth in. But I echo the first gentleman spoke, in that we have a beautiful island and really want to keep it that way. My family and I have been recycling since before it was cool, for about 46 years. We've been using reusable bags for shopping since they were first available. However, and I think I'm correct, that our mandamus counselor is going to propose a single-use plastic bag ban for the island. Most proponents of the bag bans primarily cite 3 reasons why they believe it's necessary: reduce waste, reduce litter, and help protect the environment. Banning free plastic grocery bags won't reduce waste. The Integrated Waste Management Board, this was in California, shows that plastic grocery and other merchandise bags make up 0.3% of the waste stream. They go on to say, even if all plastic grocery bags and other merchandise bags disappeared tomorrow, it would have absolutely no effect on the amount of waste disposed. And we're not proposing, or will not propose, to ban all but plastic bags. It'll simply be a very, very small percentage of those. So you can reduce that 0.3% if you like. It is a higher percentage of litter. Litter is, plastic bags make up 1 to 2% of the litter. And Mike gets about the same percentage in ocean waste, even though I know the ocean waste plastic is a major problem. The banning free bags won't reduce litter, and even though, and no amount of litter is desirable, even a small amount, but recycling is the answer, not regressive bans. Plastic grocery bags and all film plastics are 100% recyclable. You can recycle them in your curbside toter or take them to drop-off points. Within 10 miles of where I'm standing now, there are approximately 50 drop-off points. But again, not necessary to go there. They will go into your toter. As well, all plastic except number 6. All those 5s and 7s and problems we've had, they can go into your toter. Banning plastic bags won't do much to help the environment either. Plastic bags in the United States are not made from oil. They're made from ethane. If the ethane isn't used in plastic products, it's stored or burned off, thereby increasing the carbon footprint. So what will a ban on plastic bags do? I'm out of time. Those who reuse free plastic bags are going to have to go out and buy them for pet waste, whatever. And when you put loose materials in your garbage cans, Republic Services requires that you double bag them in plastic bags. And I'm out of time, and so I apologize. But I've got so much more.
If you want to provide anything to Ally, she can circulate it.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll email it. This started as 9 pages.
Should have been a lawyer?
No.
Anybody else? If not, I'll close appearances. And Rich, if you want to just update on the situation, and Katie, if there's anything you want to add to that, that would be great.
Sure. Rest assured, we are watching very carefully the rules as they're coming out from the Liquor Control Board on marijuana sales in the state of Washington and how that affects us. City staff have been working on trying to apply the rules to Mercer Island and determine whether or not, given the rules, you could even legally open a store. Initially, the board was looking at rules that had the, what is the term, most convenient path, or
Most direct route.
most direct route. Well, and then there's as the crow flies,
right.
As the other rule. As you may have seen in the news just over the weekend, they reversed themselves and are now going to the most direct route, or as the crow flies, 1,000 feet. Based on those calculations, or those rules, our calculations are, we still need to keep working on it, but we are pretty sure that you could not legally open a marijuana store on Mercer Island, given that being 1,000 feet away from sites that have children. As I say, we still got to work on it, and I want to make sure everybody understands that we are working on it. And then I guess the last thing I'd add, I'll let Katie follow up if she's got anything. Regardless of where any stores get cited on Mercer Island or off, of course, it will be illegal to sell to anybody under 21. So the law itself, the initiative, protects kids as much as they can. So anything, Katie?
Yeah, I think you said it all.
I have a request that I'd like to make to the council. There's, I think, a dozen so cities that have enacted a moratorium.
Mike, I don't want to cut you off, but I think if you want to ask that when we get to the discussion of the planning calendar, if you want to ask to have that put on as a future item, but the council, even if you make the request, the council can't respond to you now because it's not on the agenda.
Okay, that's more appropriate. I'll wait till the planning session, or planning.
That'd be great. Sure. Appreciate that. Okay, so we move to the consent calendar. We have payables and payroll. I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move that we approve the consent calendar.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. The first agenda item on regular business is Agenda Bill 4873, Thrift Shop Remodel and Expansion Pre-Design. And Glenn, you got the lead on this one?
Got the lead. Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you, Council. Good evening. We have a fairly detailed presentation, as you've seen in the agenda, Bill, and we are mirroring a lot of the information there, so I'm starting with just an overview. You'll remember back in July, you directed us to go engage the neighborhood, which we've done, so you'll hear a summary of public comments from the 2 open houses and other forms of communication that we've had, and updated revenue, costs, and financing estimates. And the finance director will share with you some late-breaking news we're calling on thrift shop revenues. We also will talk a little bit about construction impacts, design issues, including the drop-off on 78th, and finally zoning considerations. So to take you through the public comments we've gotten is Cindy Goodwin, YFS Director.
Thank you, members of the council. I believe many of you, if not all of you, were at one of the open houses, and thank you for participating. It was good to have so many citizens there as well. So there were two open houses, August 13th, as you can see, August 28th. We held one in the afternoon, one in the evening. We're really hoping to get people at one of those if they would like to come. And each of the open houses had a process to it. We spoke with people about the goals of the remodel, the intent of Youth and Family Services looking at our revenue and as a city needing to raise more funds and having the option of doing that through a thrift shop. And then we spoke about being a good neighbor. And our goal, if we were to do that, we would want to make sure that we heard from the citizens of that area about the impact on their neighborhood, specifically 34th and 78th Street. And then we wanted to hear about traffic and anything else, have them look at the plans and give us their feedback. Were we on the right track? And then we did a walking tour of the site so that we can show them with the pre-design, this is where it would come out to, and really kind of walk them through it so they could get a feel for how it happened. I want to say a bit that there were people that come, there were a lot like Mr. Johnson, who spoke this evening, very articulate, really participatory, and in a very positive way. And I would say that so many people support what the thrift shop does, even those with considerations were really open to hearing about it, but wanted to make sure that they were heard. So it was two really positive events. Since I wrote up one of your exhibits that includes all of the feedback from people that came in at that time, we wrote up all of the cards, all of the notes that we took as city staff, any email that came in, and the phone call that came in. 2 letters have been received since, so I'm glad that Peter Johnson can speak about his. There's since been one more, and that individual was a bit different in the sense that his expression was he preferred that thrift shop not be there, that be a commercial endeavor. So I'm just saying that because that's a little different. Most people really felt that it was okay to be there. They were not upset with the fact that it existed at that location. I want to move to primary concerns. Oops, sorry about that. I've summarized the primary concerns. I really tried to capture the comments verbatim from people. The primary concerns of people were the traffic flow on Southeast 34th. That's the street where the entrance to the thrift shop is, and then 78 that runs north-south. Potential increase in parking traffic with a larger thrift shop. A concern that added parking may not alleviate the problems. They want to make sure that they kept a beautiful park. Safety for the children, because some bus stops let children out right there, and children walk along there on the sidewalks. And there's some areas without sidewalks. Improving the aesthetics of the thrift shop exterior. It's an old building, and it's important for people wherever they live. And then the impact on their property values. That was an issue for people. And then ensuring that the landscaping around where the proposed drop-off is, that's done well to mitigate any potential impact for sound reverberation and also view, that it really, because it goes down at an angle, there's really the potential to make sure that it's not an eyesore, but to really pay attention to that. So that's the majority of what the public comments were around. And then the next, what I brought here is I tried to group them into primary suggestions from people. People would like to see traffic circles or crosswalks to help slow down the traffic. Most people did not want you to take parking off the street. Structure on-street parking so that you could increase the visibility at intersections, not allow people to park so closely to the entrance and exit of the thrift shop, nor close to the intersection, the four-way, any four-way stop or any intersection. Move the parking entrance to 78th. One person would like to see it not be on 34th at all, and since you're putting the donation on 78th, one person suggested, could you put the entrance to the parking lot on that side as well? And I added that because that came up a couple of times. Improve the aesthetics, in particular where the dumpsters are currently located, and the roof, which is a plastic roof of some type. And then consider eliminating drop-off hours during peak traffic times. So these were the primary suggestions. And I think I mentioned again that there was 2 recent letters that really were quite, one very supportive and at Mr. Johnson addressed, but really wanting to be sure that you didn't create another problem to eliminate a previous one. So he's made that quite clear. And then the other gentleman who just is concerned was having it in a residential area. So these were primarily people's concerns and their suggestions. And I'd also like to say that we've passed on the suggestions where we can to DSG to take a look at what can we do to help with traffic aside from any kind of remodel discussion, some of those issues can be dealt with now, so we've passed those on.
Okay, next up for the record, Chip Corder, your finance director, is going to run you through the updates to the revenues, the costs, and how to finance this thing. Attached as Exhibit 3 is your revised YFS fund financial forecast. Per me, you need about $75,000 of just cash in that fund for working capital, just for cash flow purposes. I've detailed out in your agenda bill and in this presentation the significant changes made to the forecast model. Probably one of the biggest ones is the completion date. Originally, we were assuming end of 2014. We've bumped that out 6 months to the middle of 2015. We also, based on the late-breaking news, which Cindy will be touching on after my segment, we've reduced our 2013 and 14 revenue estimates for the thrift shop. We've also assumed, to be conservatively, a 7-week closure in 2015, which would result in a loss of $212,000. As a result of those two, the 13-14 revenue reductions and the 7-week closure, that equals just a hair over $400,000. And that impacts the operating condition of the YFS fund. So what I'm saying is you would need $400,000 in one-time funding. I would recommend from surplus general fund revenues to fill that hole in the YFS fund. This is not to be confused by another $400,000 number in one-time funding. We'll be talking about in cash funding for the project, which we'll be talking about shortly. There's two different 400s out there. It's purely coincidence. This is just to square away the YFS fund. It's not about funding the project. Other changes. The total annual revenue increase, when we last talked to you, we were assuming $650,000. We've reduced that. Why? Because we've reduced the square footage per the council from 2,500 to 2,000 additional square feet, retail square feet, and just a more conservative reassessment by staff, just being more conservative on the revenue side. So we're assuming a $450,000 increase as a result of the remodel and expansion. We're also assuming a 2-year ramp up to get to that $450,000 a year from the middle of 15 through the middle of 17. In terms of staffing, assuming we cannot attract more volunteers or work-study students, we would need to hire, we're estimating, 2 casual labor positions in the middle of 2015 when the new store would open at about $46,000 a year. So that's been factored in. If you follow bond interest rates, who doesn't, right? Since we last talked to you in the middle of July, you heard Chairman Bernanke talk about the quantitative easing, pulling back on that. Well, the result has been bumping up of interest rates. So the last time we talked in July, we were assuming an average interest rate over the 20-year period of 3.41%. It's bumped up 1% to 4.42%. And it's been inching up even a little bit higher, unfortunately. But because they're talking about not pulling back so much, I'm hoping at this point that the market will respond to that and bring rates back down a little bit. But they have bumped up, and that is a concern. Okay, how do I fund all these changes that are that we've made here? They've all been about increasing expenditures or pulling back on revenues. Well, it's the general fund subsidy. In prior iterations of the forecast, you saw me trying to go from it's $320,000 this year. It's budgeted to be $200,000 next year, and then ramping it down as quickly as possible to zero. This one, I had to extend out the $200,000 subsidy, keep it in 14, extend it to 15 and 16, then start ramping it down slowly by $25,000 a year to make this work. Okay? That's the magic. I can bring up the forecast model. I can't get it to fit on the screen. If you want me to, I'm happy at this point to pull it up and field questions. Otherwise, we'll keep going through the rest of the presentation. Keep going? Okay. We can come back to it at the end if you'd like. Okay, total project cost. First of all, my apologies. This is not in your agenda bill. I don't like doing that. There was lots of discussion earlier this afternoon about what's council going to understand. What's in your agenda bill, they're real numbers. They're not wrong numbers, but they're numbers that relate to the thrift shop building itself, period. They exclude the parking lot. They exclude the park's restrooms. These numbers here include those things, and I'll walk you through them. They also include some bond issuance costs of $40,000. So back at the mini planning session on June 8th, we were talking about a 11,400 square foot building. That included the square footage for the restrooms, by the way. It reflected the long donation drop-off, multi-purpose room, park restrooms at $256,000. The parking lot was not expanded in that version. There was some restriping and added a few more spaces, but there was no more asphalt added. And this includes $40K in bond issuance costs. That's $2.85 million total project cost. Okay? Then, on July 15th, we effectively cut $1 million out of cost and dropping the square footage down to 10,000 square feet, changed the donation drop-off. There's some council interest expressed in a shortened approach, and so we shortened that, brought it closer to the cross street there. And we took out park restrooms. Park restrooms are excluded from that $1.83 million number. And then for tonight, what we're talking about is a total project cost of $2.14 million. That reflects the addition of adding back the multi-purpose room, 450 square feet. It reflects at $113,000. It reflects the expansion of the parking lot at $229,000, which includes the drainage costs. It also includes park restrooms, but at a skinnier version. Instead of 250 and change, we skinny it down to just a little under $200,000. And then the bond issuance costs. So let's focus on the $2.14 million, and let's talk about how do we fund that? How do we finance that? I'm recommending that we don't do it all with debt, that we fund $1.74 million of it, okay, with bonds, 20-year, what are called limited tax general obligation bonds, non-voted bonds. The breakdown of the 1.74 is $1.31 million for the thrift shop building, $229 for parking expansion, and $196,000 for park restrooms. And then the balance of the funding to get to the $2.14 million is $400,000 in cash. It's like a down payment on your home, just like that. And I've identified the sources. We have $170,000 in our capital reserve fund. We already had $114,000 budgeted for thrift shop repairs and $13 and $14 that would go to this project. That's an easy one. We have $100,000 that the South Fire Station bond proceeds are reimbursing for pre-design costs, reimbursing the city. So we can take that $100,000 and apply it to this project, and then I was going to just take the balance $16,000 of surplus REIT this year. That totals up $400,000 cash funding.
Chip, did you?
Yes, sir.
Did you, when you? I'm not sure I heard it. When you talked about the 229 and the 196,
yeah,
did you point out that's coming from the beautification fund?
Just getting ready to.
Okay, fine. So,
this reflects the amended latest and greatest average bond interest rate, upped from 3.41% to 4.42%, and the average annual debt service, okay, is $131,000. This is where there's a breakdown. The YFS fund of the $131,000 a year in annual principal and interest would fund $99,000 of it. And then the $32,000, this relates to the parking lot portion and the parks restroom portion, okay, which together equals $425,000, would be funded by the beautification fund. I personally would recommend adding it to the amount of debt to be funded. Why? When you're talking about bond issues that are under $5 million, it's pretty piddly in the market, and while we have a great name, the bigger the amount will attract more competitive bids, more bids, and get a better rate. And so adding that there is wise from that perspective. But I would say more importantly, I didn't want to gut the beautification fund. It's got about $571,000 of available cash. I didn't want to just take $425,000 of it and use it to fund those two, the parking lot and the restrooms. Let's just use it with debt, because the impact on the beautification fund is only $32,000 a year. That's manageable. So that's the financing piece of it. Next is the late-breaking news, and it really was late-breaking. Literally, we were finishing the agenda bill. We're finding out at kind of the 11th hour and 59th minute, and that's just the way it was. I'll let Cindy explain.
Thank you, Chip. So, late-breaking news, I want to talk a little bit about why it's late-breaking. For us, there's so many things that you balance in the thrift shop. A lot of retails, you'll have a certain amount of staff, you'll have a certain amount of goods. It's kind of fixed. You can predict them. For us, sometimes it's not as predictable. We have to look at work-study students core volunteers, and if you have a core volunteer that works 30 hours a week and they leave for 6 months to go somewhere, and they let you know a few weeks ahead of time, that's a huge chunk. If you let somebody go and who donated hours for theft, which happened, huge impact on one area itself. So we had a few things happen at once. Well, we also have to balance, is looking at when we have a dip, is this a temporary dip or is this going to be a trend? So as you can see, we're doing fine through March, and we monitor everything. We always talk about how are we doing with volunteer hours, how are we doing with work-study reimbursements. There were cuts to that. Do we have the same number of youth coming through our doors to work there? And we monitor these things to see what's going on. So it was down a little bit through June 30th, and we were trying to estimate. We needed to make, for our projected revenues, 16% increase this year, and that would be the normal 5% increase, as well as an increase for opening on Sundays. Made a decision to open on Sundays. And at the time that we did that, it was a solid decision. People were asking us, are you ever open on Sundays? Our revenues were, everything was going well. It was a good decision to make. So we made that decision. At the same time, as you can see, we started to experience a trend, and we started to be too slim. We were unable to recruit work-study students this summer. Usually you have a number of students that stay, and for several reasons we didn't have the same group. We had a significant reduction in volunteer core hours. It was flat for the first quarter, and then it decreased from the second quarter to the present to down about 26%. There's a huge impact on the amount of work that we can do. And by that I mean those are the people that sort goods, get it on the shelf, make sure that it's priced consistently, and that when you open up at the morning, you're ready to go. At 7, you're ready to go, and that you have a good day of sales. So that's what we're trying to balance in this. And then, like I said, we expanded store hours, and it was really exacerbated because we were hoping that it was a strong time to do that. So these were all the factors that we were taking a look at. And we're trying to determine, is this temporary? We think now that, thank you, thanks for doing that, that staffing, we are working hard to address the staffing shortfall. We're taking a look at, we've shifted outreach, how we do outreach to the universities that we work with. We're trying to figure out how to get kids back. When there was a reduction in work-study funds and you have a reduction in students, they don't tell their friends, so you're working with that. We've also decided to go speak with where the work-studies did take jobs and why did they take those jobs, so we can figure out why are they elsewhere. So we have started looking at, if we're experiencing this trend, why? How do we get back on track? We've increased outreach on the island. We've partnered with a large service club to bring in people on a regular basis. So we're doing things to mitigate this, but it will take us a while. We're adjusting all of our job descriptions to align with certain majors at the school. We can work with universities on that. So we'll work on that. We see it as temporary. We know that we can get it up because we know how the thrift shop works, but it's an art. It's not, it's a little bit different than your average business. So when we take a look at the estimated financial impact, it can be up to $100,000 for 2014. This is going to be in addition to what we needed in the past. So that's what we're looking at right now. And again, it's late because we have to at some point determine, is it a trend that we need to worry about, or is it just a normal dip? And that's when, about August, as we're writing this, we got concerned that it was more and went to CHIP. So that's where we are now with CHIP.
Just want to add something.
Yeah.
On the last bullet point, let me just clarify. So when I mentioned you needed $400,000 in one-time funding just to square away the YFS fund, the first $400,000, this potentially is up to another $100,000 in addition to that because of this drop. It all depends, you know, how quickly Suzanne and the crew can turn things around at the thrift shop. And you know, we're talking 2 to 3 months to get it squared away, and then we want to have at least 3+ months of an actual record of consistently, you know, we want some actual experience under our belt where we have confidence. So we're conservatively pushing certain decisions out, which we'll tee up in the last slide, out until next year. Next.
So one of the things we've done recently is to talk with a contractor who does this sort of work about how we could potentially phase it. And of course, predictably, it's a little bit less expensive if we can close down. We took a look at, it's about a 4-week gap, as you see. If we try to work around operations in the thrift shop, it's going to add a month. Additional cost of about $25,000.
Are you asking tonight for council guidance on that, or are you just telling us that you're considering?
Great. Yeah, if council wants to
No,
weigh in.
I'm just curious whether that was something you're looking for the council to, I mean, I've got a list of things I think you're wanting council guidance on. I didn't have that on my list, but I'm just wondering if you are asking for us.
I think it'd be great, because that will be a design consideration. Construction documents would have to be structured in a way that either we clear out or we work around the business of the thrift shop.
And I hope in that conversation that you and Chip can give your recommendation just from a purely project management and financial point of view. The council can assess
Right, I
that
agree,
against
Yeah, I just wasn't
impacts.
sure, I wasn't sure from that slide what you were asking us. Okay.
So would it be helpful, as we get into this first design issue, if we look at the couple graphics you've seen?
Well, I think before we do that, I'd like to give the council a chance to ask any questions on what anyone has presented so far. Donna?
I just want to clarify, when you're, if this is more question more for Cindy, when you're talking about a drop in revenue, I just want to clarify that you are talking about a drop in revenue growth. So it's not a drop in revenue, it's a drop
That's right.
in the growth rate.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, I think we're doing what we did last year, but what we project is a 16% increase to make this year's projected revenues, and that's what we're talking about, is we're a bit below that. Yeah.
Jane, I think you had a question?
Yeah, I was just curious, in weighing whether to close down for a month or to try to have the contractor work around, what's the loss of monthly revenue for?
Yeah, that's the key question. This is a financial, purely from a financial perspective, no-brainer. Every month that it's closed, that's around $115,000. Okay? So
it's a no-brainer in the sense that you strongly recommend we keep it open?
keep it open. You're still going to have a 5-week closure according to this, which is factored into the forecast, but to shut it down for the longer period of time, that'd be a killer financially.
So I'm sorry, I didn't catch that from Glenn's slide. So even with the keeping it open, we're still closed for 5 weeks?
Is that the minimum?
Yes.
They can
Yeah.
only open
Oh, I see, okay.
So roughly, just shy of 4
okay,
months for construction.
Right. Okay.
I can't absorb 4.
Sure, no, I understand. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Mike?
Thank you. So the first presentation, the first financials that you gave us, you had growth at 3%, and now you have it at 5%. Why the increase?
The growth in what, Mike?
Right, the growth in the thrift shop revenue?
The one, you referring to the July 15th, or the mini planning session?
I think it was the mini
planning session. A lot's changed since then. That was my attempt to be conservative on the growth, but keep in mind also was estimating $650,000 increase that was tied to a much higher retail square footage number. And so, I know based on experience, the thrift shop has no problem generating at least 5% annual growth. This was us being conservative, that when you have that big bump from the increase in retail store square footage based on the mini planning session look or pre-design, that at some point you just kind of reach saturation. You wouldn't be able to maintain that 5% annual growth. Just conservative, more conservative.
Yeah, I kind of, okay, well, I'll say that for my comments. Are we talking about the design part?
We're just asking questions. Any questions
Okay,
on anything that's been
question.
presented so far?
The question I had at the last time, Glenn, and I didn't see it addressed here, was, and it seemed to catch the architects a little bit off guard, was making that right-hand turn on 78th out of the, for the garbage trucks, making that right-hand turn. If they would be able to do that. It seemed like they would not be able to do that.
Yeah, I've talked a little bit with the architect about that. It's really just a matter of geometry. There's a way to make that happen. The balance will be impact on the park.
And the wall there, is there any special designs for ensuring that kids aren't going to fall down on it?
Yes, the landscape architect who you met at the mini planning session has actually talked about some other projects they've done in Seattle that deal with this exact issue of a wall adjacent to a park or a play area.
Debbie?
Two questions. One we have discussed, I think, on and off, and that is, at $200,000 for the bathroom, it's quite a significant sum, actually 10% almost of the entire construction project. Is there an alternative for a cheaper facility?
Yeah, what was envisioned in the original pre-design was a full-blown park-style restroom that would accommodate multiple people on each side. We could, on the other end of the scale, would be a unisex restroom facility, which we could do easily with this facility and would cost a small percentage of that original cost.
Okay, great. The second question is going back to Councilmember Ciro's regarding the wall. I assume somebody has reached out to MIPA. And yeah, please.
I spoke with one of the chairs of the Mercer Preschool Association to ask them. I wanted to get their thoughts on where the park is located. What do they think about that? Because I heard some concerns from the citizens who live in that area. Why did they put it so close to the street? Why do they have it over there? Those were some of the concerns. And so I asked her, has anybody brought up to you, or do your members have a concern about where it's located in the park? And she said no. Her first question, that's the first thing I want to know, is where it's located, you feel good about it? And she said yes. No one's mentioned that it's unsafe. You know, it's far enough from the road, and there's enough space that if your child did walk that way, you could talk to them, you could get them. That's not been an issue for anybody that she knew. So I said that was great. And then I talked with her a bit about what we were planning to do in the pre-site design, and I said, I want to run this by you and ask you your thoughts about this as somebody who talks about these issues with people. And she said, you know, I don't see any concern with that. And she offered to have us come to one of their meetings if we wanted any kind of focus group on that. And but didn't see, saw that as doable, and as long as it was done to, like we'd had our architects, so I went over what it could look like and how it could be safe for children, and that didn't seem to be an issue for them. But they are willing to allow us to use them as a focus group if we need, so.
Super, thanks for
Yeah.
Mike, did you have a question? I didn't see if you raised your hand.
I did, Dan. Just to follow up, we had some public comment about the turnabout location coming off of 78th. Is that still locked and loaded, or are we willing to re-examine that particular issue?
The access to the new drop-off?
Yeah.
Yeah, the current pre-design configuration is a very short driveway.
I think the question was whether it could be 78th or 34th. That was what Pete was referring to. So I think Mike was asking whether there's anyone still looking at an option of doing something on 34th.
If the council directs us to in design, certainly.
Are there any alternatives that have been developed?
No. That was the solution to reduce impacts on 34th and move the traffic onto an arterial.
And then the body of the public comment that you received supported that, didn't, neutral?
I'll let Cindy speak to that. I think mostly supportive.
Most supported it. We heard it from Peter Johnson this evening, and there's one other person that would like to see it go there. And in fact, if anything, I think more people would like to see the driveway to the park on that side as well. So I would say most people support it being on 78th and not 34th.
Okay. I get some questions too, but I'll let you go first.
Just wanted to follow up on the bathroom question. So we started with $256,000 for a deluxe bathroom, and now we're down to $196 for a medium deluxe, and then you said you could go to a unisex for barely any cost. What's that middle bathroom we're getting? If you could just explain the difference between a relatively low-cost unisex and what we're getting now.
Not get too graphic here. A typical park restroom has 3 stalls, so this would be a reduced number. So it's just, you just continue to shrink up the space, but there would be separate facilities for men and women, boys and girls, down to a unisex. That's the other end of the spectrum.
Well, the other end's Santa cans.
That's right.
Or we could have Mike's composting toilet. I just had a couple of questions, or a few questions. Chip, on the 20-year bonds, how many points would you save if you cut it down to 10 years? 20 years is I mean, you're doing the 4.4% on 20 years. Do you know did you price it out at 10 years?
I can't afford it. I wish I could, because the interest rates on the first 10 years are still really low, like we did on the fire station bonds. I forget what the annual debt service was, but it was too high for the YFS fund.
Yeah, but I mean, I'd be interested in, when it comes back to the council, I mean, because you do have money in the beautification fund, so you might still, I mean, if it's a huge spread, if it's more than 100 basis points, then it's worth talking to us about at least, so we understand what our options are.
To give you a metric, the 1% increase from the 3.4 to 4.4, that was an $11,000 increase in annual debt service for that 1%. Doesn't sound like much. I would expect the average interest rate on 10-year bonds to be definitely a 1%, probably 1 3/4 to 2% lower, depending. That's the way it looked in the first half of the year.
Okay, I'm curious, but I mean,
I'll take a look at it again.
I'd be interested if you came back to the council with some specifics on that, so we understand what the consequences are. Cindy, a few things. On your slide where you said the primary issues raised by people who commented, there were some that caught my attention and some that I heard also when I was at one of your sessions. The issue of the exterior, the aesthetics of the building. Yeah. Are you doing anything different than you were planning on doing in order to address those comments on just the exterior aesthetics?
So the exterior, the way that it's planned to be remodeled, is actually quite aesthetically pleasing. And I think that when we get down to that, I guess maybe that detail in it, make sure that the roof and the plastic roof would be changed, that we would give that specific feedback. But as it's designed now, it's actually quite aesthetically pleasing.
Okay. The issue of and this partially may address what the two of the people who talked during appearances, Peter, the drop-off hours, that was one of the comments. Is there any discussion of making sure we don't have drop-off in the middle of rush hour traffic or high traffic times? Is that being talked about at all?
We haven't talked about that yet, but we certainly will. And we have shortened our hours, so we don't do it past 4 now. But we could certainly take a look at that wherever it ends up, responding to what people think about that, yeah.
Okay, also there was comments regarding the landscaping, and just curious again whether you're doing anything different as a result of those comments, or?
The planned landscaping, I believe, makes provisions for a 4-to-1 ratio of replanting trees and a barrier. So it's pretty hardy right now, but we'll make sure that the landscape architect that we work with gets that feedback from citizens.
And last question is really I think probably for Ann more than anyone else, because this came up at the session that both of us were at, that the whole question of traffic in the neighborhood, and I know that I think the comment you made at the time was that whether or not the thrift shop changes, that's something that you could look at, the whole traffic question, and it might be helpful to just sort of give us an idea of where you think you're heading in terms of a review of traffic in the neighborhood next to the thrift shop.
I'm getting a baseline we talked.
That's probably unfair to surprise you with that question.
That's okay. For the record, Ann Tanella Howe, Assistant City Engineer. And at the time, several in the community had raised concern about what was really being perceived, I think, as some neighborhood traffic issues. Their cut-through traffic was mentioned, speeding vehicles, the concern that maybe visitors to the thrift store and or maybe the park were parking in the neighborhood, so encroaching onto the residential streets. This, to be perfectly honest, this was something that I wasn't aware that there was a concern in the neighborhood. It's been a fairly quiet neighborhood. We haven't had a lot of requests for traffic calming or neighborhood traffic control type activities. So what I was suggesting to the group that came was that we really need to establish a baseline. We really need to gather some traffic data to get a good idea of whether there are speeding concerns, whether there are volume concerns, whether there are cut-through concerns, and where those are happening. So if the baseline data plays out that there might be some issues, if and when the thrift store is enhanced, enlarged, we can plan to do some neighborhood traffic control type activities in relationship to that.
So are you planning on going ahead with the baseline?
I am planning to go ahead with the baseline. It will probably happen towards the end of this month or towards the 1st of October. Really want it, and this is something I shared with the neighbors, really need to let school get back in session, let traffic patterns sort of reestablish themselves after the summer activities. So make sure we get some good data for what might be happening on a sort of on a well, don't want to call it regular basis, but a more uniform, predictable basis.
Okay. So. Any other questions, Mike?
Thank you. I'm not sure, Chip, this might be yours. So of the present building is 8,000? Is it 8,000 square feet?
In round numbers, yes.
Okay. Of that 8,000, how much of it is floor space?
As in retail?
As in retail.
I think we had that data back at the planning session, if anybody's got the ability to pull it up.
I don't recall it being at the planning session.
I think it was like 6,000 or so, but don't quote me.
Okay, and then the next question is with a proposed new 12,000 or 10,000 square foot, how much of that will be retail?
The increase under the current plan is 2,000 additional retail square feet.
I don't think so.
Yeah, it is.
It's not all retail. I mean, we know that.
I didn't say it's all retail. I'm saying while they're figuring that number out, what you asked for, I'm saying that the added retail square footage is 2,000.
Can I clarify? So we have about close to 8,000, 7,600 square feet. About 3,100 right now is retail, and we'd gain an additional 2,000. So we'd go up to close to 6,000. Is that right, Suzanne? Did I get that right?
I think that's the same, 58 to 6,000 square feet.
We would at the end, when everything's said and done, 58 to 6,000 square feet.
Okay.
Any other questions? So I think, I'm sorry, Jane.
I wanted to ask about the restroom plan. Do we have any drawings or anything? This would be a freestanding restroom or a restroom attached to the corner of the building there?
Well, we haven't gotten into the details of designing that yet, but I think the vision is to probably have it attached to the building, close to the playground. That's the primary audience for the restroom.
Okay. And then how did we end up then with the drop-off area? Is it the long drop-off from the current cut or the shortened one?
It's currently the short drop-off.
Mm-hmm.
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 Okay, so I think you were about to tee up the issues, and I guess that was the first one, that the length of the driveway is the first one you were going to tee up for us.
Yep. Would it be helpful to take a look at the two different drawings just to understand?
Sure.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, great. So here you see the shortened driveway. The The next image you'll see shows it at the existing cut in the median on 78th. So this is bringing it down to what seemed like about as close as we can get it to the intersection. The issue, I think all of you know, you saw it in the results of reaching out to the neighborhood, is there's concern if it's too close to the neighborhood, there would be a potential for drivers to turn who want to turn left to not be able to get into traffic and instead turn right, go into 34th and do.
Use the mouse to kind of just trace what the issue is, right?
Yeah. So, what did we do there?
Oh, pointer.
Is there? What did we do there, Chip? I didn't catch what you said. We do there. We went to a different image. One second.
Just scroll down or scroll up.
Yeah.
There
we go.
That top button has the laser.
So the concern is that folks who are actually trying to go left there would instead be frustrated by traffic. It said turn right and come down into 34th and do a U-turn and turn left at the four-way stop. That's the concern that it was a theme in the comments.
You don't see this from the drawing, Jane, though, but there would be a median cut right where that driveway is.
Where the E and the U.
The new one.
Right, there'd be a new median cut, and the extended driveway would actually go to where the existing median cut is. So it's very easy to see on that drawing the difference in the length of the two driveways.
Right, okay.
Yeah, not to get too deep into the details here, but the driveway has to have at least about this length because the truck that comes to pick up the things that aren't sold in the thrift shop is a larger vehicle, so it has to be able to get in and out.
And does that, do the little hash marks indicate how many cars might fit in there lined up, like 5 cars?
That's a good guess. I'm not sure exactly what they...
Yeah, I'm just trying to visualize how long it would be, because currently when you drive in, there might be 2 or 3 cars.
Queuing's a definite consideration. Mm-hmm. The answer is yes, I'm hearing.
So, since this issue has my name attached to it, I will comment on this. Yeah, I've made it very clear to staff that this, to me, would make the difference between whether I supported this project or opposed this project. That taking that much more of the park to go down to the existing median cut, to me, is a huge difference, and particularly when I think of the fact that there would be a wall along the entire length of that driveway. So not only do you have an extended driveway, additional green that's lost, additional trees that are lost, but in addition you've got this wall which extends another, what is it, probably 40 feet or so. So it's, I think, I just, yeah, the comment that was made by one individual about the, for a different purpose, so saying that we're taking away park, I would want to take away as little of the park as possible, and this is a perfect place not to take away park area, in my opinion. So, and I honestly, I as much as I understand, I hear what the neighborhood is saying off of 34th. I guess I don't understand why moving it farther down does anything regarding the traffic. If anything, by that point, the traffic has sped up from the intersection. When you're closer to the stop sign at the corner of 34th and 78th, I think it's more likely you'll be able to make that left turn when you're farther down. The other thing I'd point out, you don't see it in that drawing, but that median cut actually is there because there's a dry entrance to the medical building right across from there. And so now you're going to have traffic going into that median cut from both directions. So you potentially have another problem that some traffic coming from the east is going to want to turn, go through that, and now you got traffic from the west also going through the same median cut, which I think is, being the expert traffic engineer that you all know that I am, I think that could cause some problems.
I just might add that we're confident that this can be figured out. Minimize the impact on the park and make the traffic work for 34th as well as 78th.
In talking to staff today, it was clear that you don't make this decision based on the cost of the driveway, because The curb cut, sorting that out probably equals the savings on the asphalt that you're building. In other words, you make this based on just configuration and impact on park and sort of non-monetary criteria.
So I guess if anyone else wants to speak to this issue, otherwise we'll just go our usual thumbs up, thumbs down on alternatives.
We just see the lawn.
Just by contrast, here was the original pre-designed concept.
Oh, that's with the addition.
Yeah,
It's totally
that's
different.
a little different.
That's-
This is,
Yeah, that's got the bigger
this-
addition.
yes, because this building would be moved back here, so
Mhm.
that all of the turnaround would be here. Keep that in mind.
Mhm.
That makes sense. We don't have I don't think we have a newer picture with the driveway farther out.
So can we speak to it, and then I think we're finished with questions.
Sure.
Now we'll speak to it.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a question though, Glenn. So I'm not seeing any alternative other than coming off of 78th. Were there any alternatives or schematics keeping a turnabout on 34th?
Not that it was designed.
This pretty quickly rose to the top as what seemed like the most elegant solution. So, no, we didn't put a lot of effort into looking at maintaining. We were already aware of the impacts in the neighborhood.
And at the council's planning session and then the subsequent meeting in July, that was not a request of the council to develop another alternative. So what we're showing you is what you asked us to come back and look at.
And this takes care of the aesthetics of the front of the building with the dumpster and everything. So
Right.
this takes
Correct.
care of a lot of different things,
Yes.
too.
I'm curious, does it move the aesthetics on does it move the dumpster so it's on 78th now, visible from the apartments across the street?
Absolutely, absolutely.
In fact, I can only tell you, I think, what the design people said. I think they're saying that, one, a covering comes down, so it will be covered, and there'll be quite a bit of landscape design. So also the grade. So the land goes down like this, so it won't be up high. So that was their take on that, and they were very careful about that. It is on that side, so there will be some impact, but they were careful about that. So it goes down, it's covered, and there'll be a lot of foliage, and purposely to make sure that we don't move something unattractive to that side. So.
Mike?
So Glenn, with this schematic you have here, I'm assuming the wall that you're referring to is the wall in between the new pavement for the cars and the playground just off to the left.
Yes.
So what buffer do you have in between the playground and the cars that are going to be going in and out of there?
The wall.
Other than the wall?
It'll be landscaped. Right.
Just from a safety standpoint, this actually acts as a real buffer between the playground and the street
We
in a
believe
way
so.
that there isn't right
Yeah,
now.
we believe so.
It will be safer, I think, than before.
Can you also talk a little bit about where the dumpster is now and what's happening with that corner of the thrift shop?
I can. The dumpster is here. This is where the dumpster is, recycling. It's in this area right here.
Cindy, can you talk into the microphone, please?
Thank you, yes. So this is right here in the northwest corner is where they currently have donations and the dumpster. It's kept right there, and that's where it's taken out of on a daily basis. And it would go be undercovered here, and then there would be vegetation along here.
So there would be vegetation between the road, between 78th and the driveway?
Correct.
So people from the...
Increased.
Would people from the buildings see the driveway?
You know, We're doing.
I mean, obviously, if you're up high enough, you're going to look down on it, but.
When you look down on a roof, hopefully you won't look down on a dumpster. It will be covered, and there'll be trees.
But if
So the
you-
view will be different. I mean,
If
that-
you're
I can
walking
see
along
that.
the sidewalk on 78th, would you see the,
No, the intent is not have that be seen.
So, maybe just to clarify my question, I know that there's a white dumpster and there's also a blue dumpster. Would both be moved into the back?
There's a white dumpster, and I believe the blue is a drop-off box that will.
A trash can, big trash dumpster?
Is that? Can you address that, Susan? I'm not sure what that is. Or is that the Big Brothers Big Sisters?
Suzanne Feline, the Thrift Shop Business Coordinator. Currently, there is the dumpster that is a 13-yard dumpster in front of the store, and further down in the parking lot, there is a recycling dumpster. Both of those containers will be moved to the back of the store. The architect is looking at different options for that recycling bin. Probably a fence that will be built on the outside to kind of screen that within that drop-off area so that it can be pulled out.
Okay. So again, just, I guess as a comment, but just to point out, aesthetically, it sounds like that will be a large improvement in that area.
so let me just bring the council back to the immediate question is the length of the driveway. We can add questions once we decide the length of the driveway, whether we want to give staff further direction on the aesthetics of that. But right now, I'd like to get a council take on the length of the driveway. Any more comments on that before we?
And remember, we haven't done a design, so this is to give us a general direction on your sense of the scope to send us off to design. And we'll come back with details about it as part of a design contract.
No, I think what we'll do, and Ally, if you just will keep track on, right now, we're talking about whether we're doing the extended driveway or the shortened driveway, and then, so the council will, any further comments on that?
Shortened driveway.
Okay, is there, people in favor of the shortened driveway? So that's unanimous, 6-0, the shortened driveway. Okay, as long as we have the, that in front of us, was, in terms of the aesthetics, does anyone want to give, I think there are two aesthetic issues, and I don't, in terms of, one, any kinds of coverage of the dumpsters, and second would be the wall, which I think, Mike, you were referring to, and is there any desire in the council to give at least some preliminary, and I'll just tee this one up for what it's worth. I assume you can go from a stone wall to a wood wall to a landscape buffer with somehow still something which prevents children from going through, and I think that, at least I personally would hope that we don't end up with something which looks like a concrete noise barrier, for a lot of reasons, but I would
Should the
hope.
design commission will get involved with that, don't you think?
No, this is design commission. I don't think has jurisdiction on this.
They do have a review. It's voluntary. It's not, they don't have statutory review authority. But what I'm hearing is, the question is, should you send us off with sensitivities to the aesthetics and the safety of that wall? And I would assume our architect would not go after being unsafe and being ugly. But if you want to make that a point, then I urge you to do that, and we will try to be safe and aesthetic.
No, I
Reinforces aesthetic.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's important to reinforce that there are concerns both from the aesthetics from the park, the aesthetics from the neighborhood, that those be given very strong considerations.
Sure.
In this process. I think that as Rich responded to Mike Grady's question before about the issue of the entrance on 34th versus 78th, the council, for better or worse, gave staff direction at the planning session back in June to go forward with the access on 78th. So staff has not made any effort to design something other than the access on 78th. So for the council to change gears at this point would would be a little bit difficult, to be candid. But what the council can do is, and I think I'm hearing everyone say that, is to be very aesthetically conscious, both from the neighbors and from the park. Okay.
I think we got it.
Okay.
Here's just another aesthetic comment. I don't know how much grading needs to be done, but there's quite a bit of difference in grade from where the turnaround area will be. It's down quite a bit, and if that could be graded down even further, it would screen the dumpster areas from the height. So if there's an opportunity to get it down another foot or two, the turnaround area down below, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, and I think the architect just needs to look. I mean, I don't even, given what Jane was also saying, I don't know if if you put the dumpsters closer to 78th, for example, and so you don't even see them from up above, so you screen them off from there. Because right now, if you put them on the west side, effectively, there's really no way you can prevent people from seeing them. But if you actually were to push them into the hillside in 78th and then cover them over, then you might be actually able to screen them completely from the people in the apartments across the way. So it's just, again, I know we shouldn't play architects or traffic designers or whatever else, but it's too tempting not to do that.
And what color would you guys like?
As long as you asked.
We're traffic engineers, we could be designers too.
Okay, so I'm sure you have another question you'd like to pose to us, Glenn.
Yeah, the multi-purpose room is our next issue, which was in, out, and now we're proposed to put it back in based on feedback that Suzanne and Cindy have heard from their folks, primarily volunteers. We didn't have an opportunity to look at alternatives. We just plugged back in the square footage that was in the original pre-design, but we need to know what the council's thoughts are on re-including the multi-purpose space.
Jane?
What was the square footage of that?
450.
Oh, okay.
450.
If I could just say a couple things about this. At one of our last meetings with all the staff, we do a volunteer meeting. We've kind of shifted away around the way that we do business at the shop to really make our processing more efficient. And what it's done is it's taken over the area where all of the volunteers would work, and they would hang out together and they would get things done. And a lot of these people are between 60 to 80. They've been there for many, many years. A lot of the newer people have come to make friends. So what happened and what we heard last time was that they feel like they're being pushed out, that it's not about them. It's not about community, it's about just making money. And it is about making money, except that in making money, we rely on the goodwill of people to donate their time. And it's really become apparent what happens is if we're being very efficient and working and they have smaller space, well, they come there, they don't feel a place for them, and they leave. And so we're trying to balance, but they really made a case for they want some place to eat and be together, and they can't just be standing up or in small spaces. And so it became apparent, in particular for the elderly people, that some kind of common space for lunch, for doing projects together and working side by side was what's needed. They can't, what we did was we toured a lot of thrift shops, and the way that some of the bigger businesses do it is donations come in, you're standing in a line. It's pretty much a processing. You've got to get so many things on a hanger, maybe 8 within 30 seconds. It's really quite quick. So we were looking at their models, and it was really helpful from getting things out of bags onto the floor, being able to price consistently. But we didn't realize until really the past few months how it affected our volunteer corps. So being there, as you have people that age and as you have people who are doing service because they have special needs, being with each other and having time to do that is crucial to having them stay there. So that was when we said we've really got to make sure that we have a space for them. So that's a lot about what went into that thought.
Questions? Jane?
Comment, no.
Questions? Comments? Mike? Or you just thumbs up?
I'm just coming up to the idea, so I agree completely. I agree completely with Cindy, and to what extent we can enhance staff morale, particularly volunteers, we should do that.
Jane?
I think the thrift shop wouldn't be here without the wonderful volunteers. And we'd be cutting off our nose to spite our face if we made it unpleasant for them. We have the benefits of all those volunteers, and we need to make a comfortable space for them. We wouldn't be here otherwise. Thumbs up.
Are we making comment on that
Just
multi-purpose or the whole?
Just the multi-purpose room.
Multi-purpose, yeah.
Any other comments on the multi-purpose room? Okay, so the issue before the council is whether we add $113,000 to the budget to fund the multi-purpose room, and that is included in the numbers that Chip has already presented, so there would not be in addition to what you've already seen. So thumbs up on that? So it's 6-0 for the multi-purpose room. Okay, Glenn, you're going...
You just put a smile on Cindy's face.
Okay.
So the next thing
is the bathroom going to show up as one of these?
No.
So maybe before you get into zoning, we should talk about the bathroom. Or does anyone want to take a break first and talk? Now, as just so let me tee up the issue as I understand it. Right now, the proposal, I got to get straight, does or does not include the bathroom? The 1.7 does or does not include?
That does not, but the 2.414 that I showed you does.
The most recent number.
The most recent number.
Okay, so with your, that's with, okay, right. So the 2.14 includes $196,000 for the bathroom, and that's both the construction costs and the soft costs?
Yes.
Okay. So, and we don't have a number yet on a further reduced, could be unisex, could be even smaller version of it. So I think the issue before the council is, first, two issues. One, do we include any bathroom at all? And second, do we want staff to reduce the size of this even further, or at least come back to the council with a reduced scope, possibly unisex, possibly
What's on there now is a medium size, and so the question would be, go to even smaller.
right. As I understand from that, we started out with 3 stalls per sex, and now we're talking about 2 stalls, and so we're working our way down to 1 or a half.
Latrine out back or something like that.
So, no, but seriously, the first question is, do we want any bathrooms there? And so that's the first thing I need to, for those who want to have bathrooms, thumbs up on the bathrooms.
For those of us who want to go home to our children,
Okay, so the 6-0, we want something that is called a bathroom. So the issue now is really, I assume no one is asking for to go back to the $250,000 version. Okay, so the issue is the $196,000, or I'll put it this way: if thumbs up for $196,000, thumbs down if you want staff to come back with yet a reduced cost option. Well,
I don't have to make a decision.
no, I hear what you're saying, but on the other hand, we're trying to give staff guidance, and the more we tell them to design different alternatives, the more we drive up design costs. So I think at this point, we need to sort of bite the bullet. At least in my opinion, we need to bite the bullet and tell them whether we want them to scale this back. It doesn't have to be, we can say we don't want it unisex, so it can be just a smaller version of 2 different toilets, but restrooms, but I think that we need to give staff guidance at this point. So
We need hot water.
We need the hot water, it'll come with hot water.
Hot water and cold water and soap, yeah.
And change. So first, let me see, is there, as between the $196,000 version and the less expensive version, again, for those who want the $196,000 version, thumbs up. For those who want a cheaper one, thumbs down. We'll do it that way. So it looks like we have a majority who want a reduced cost version.
Okay.
Can we identify the functions that we would like to see?
I'll let people use their imagination.
Well, I think by regulation, you're limited to minimums, having redesigned the Sunny Beam bathroom, so regulation's going to drive the minimum. And the minimum, frankly, is very sufficient, you'll find.
Yeah. So, I mean, if anyone in the council feels otherwise, I think the direction of the staff is to come down with the reduced cost version. If you can, I'll say if you can come back with a very tasteful unisex changing table, hot water, soap, I would find that to be a positive improvement.
Same, however, if there's a middle ground, I don't want to insinuate that the council direction is that it has to be unisex. I think if we can have a two-sided for less than that, great. So I just want to clarify, I don't think the council direction is necessarily unisex, it's just less than 196.
Can we just have separate doors?
We really should move on, because I got to observe, I doubt the Seattle City Council spends this much time on the design of park restrooms. We get where you want to go, let's move on.
Okay.
A fortune on their
okay.
Pioneer
Well, maybe
Park.
they should,
Yeah.
They picked a couple restrooms that probably could have been rethought.
So what is your next issue, now that
Zoning. Zoning's a lot less interesting, I suppose, but this is one of the reasons actually where we have had to acknowledge that we can't get this built and opened by the beginning of 2015. There are 3 different zoning actions that will have to take place. So the slide summarizes for you, but we have to rezone it to P, and that requires some other activities to happen. So this will take a while. It will happen. Actually, we would start doing this on a parallel track with design.
I will ask I think the obvious question. We could do a development agreement with ourselves to obviate this issue?
I don't know.
I mean, it says, to go through a zoning process versus development agreement process, it's the same kind of public input, and I'm just curious, the public's going to be no less cynical of us for rezoning something for our own benefit versus doing a development agreement for our own benefit. Or maybe, do you disagree with that, Rich?
I think it's a very appropriate, right thing to do, to go through the zoning process. You need to write zoning code text for a P-zone anyway. It's just a piece of work that's been needed for a couple of years. We need to do it anyway. I don't think you're going to get, I think it's the right thing to do, is go through the zoning process. To do a development agreement with yourself, I think would invite way more controversy. People would really wonder about that.
But the issue with the P-zone is that's also for the schools.
It's for the schools and any other public property, which in some of the properties that we own.
But, my concern, very simply, is that as soon as we enter the P-zone world and need to talk about the schools, that raises a whole host of other issues that we're going to have to deal with, all of which are important to deal with, but I see that as I think that's going to be quite a lengthy process.
Frankly, I think it's not. I think it's going to be, we're working on it already, staff to staff with the district. I think it's going to work out. Scott's been working with his staff. It's a piece of work that we need to get on with next year, and we'll want to wait till the vote, because I think that will make sense. But I don't think that the P-zone work that we're doing here on the thrift shop is anything to get too concerned about. I think it can be done. Scott?
Just before you do that, let me just throw one other, what is this facility in there now? Is it conditional use permit, or how is it permitted? Or just a non-conforming use?
I think it's residential. I think it's a non-conforming use. Oh, it's conditional use permit, that's right.
So would we have the option of doing another conditional use permit?
You would, but I think that the development standards of the R zone would be restrictive, because we've looked at that. I wasn't prepared really to come answer that question tonight, but my recollection is that
the P-zone work is going to...
No, I'm not minimizing the importance of the P-zone, but I'm trying to...
It's setbacks,
Impervious surface.
Impervious surface, all those things.
I have a
Same issues that
question,
the
I
schools
kind of have
have.
a question on that. Did we look at a design under the present zoning standards on what we could do?
Yes, and virtually nothing. The site's already over on impervious, so.
Because I'd like the council to
Zoning has-
consider, it's the same thing I brought up with some other things, is, these zoning requirements that we have, it's for the protection of both the property owner, in this case, the city, to develop their property, but it's also, we zone to protect the neighbors. So the neighbors, they buy a house, a neighboring property, and they see what zoning it is. So I wouldn't, I think we've maybe prematurely just assumed that we were going to P-zone it. I have some reservations about that.
Well, I'll remind the council, the entire park is P-zone. You're talking about a sliver on this, a wedge on the south end that's residential, because it used to be a long time ago a series of individual single-family lots that got bought up by the Boys and Girls Club, and they put in a Boys and Girls Club there and a swimming pool. But
It was a country club.
it was the country club. A country club. It's now the thrift shop, and it's right next to a park, which is a much bigger acreage. It's all P-zone. And so this would be to rezone to a same zoning as everything else that's going on in that area, and have consistent development standards. So I think it's the right thing to do. And yeah, is there somebody's going to speak up to it? Sure, but from a land use planning and management point of view, it's the right thing to do.
I really came in to just answer Deputy Mayor Grouse's question about the development agreement. Development agreement is only allowed in the town center zone. So wouldn't this would not even be eligible for a development agreement to modify development standards.
Okay, it's good to know.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So let me just understand, so the consequences of doing this, well, let's back up for a second. It seems your biggest issue is Chip is already gone. You're delaying your bond issuance for...
Right, that's right.
So you're potentially running up your borrowing costs if the bonds continue going up in cost.
And I think Chip's confident, here he is, that by the second quarter, well, actually before the second quarter, we'll know if the staffing issues can be straightened out.
But that's nothing to do with, I mean, your interest rates are probably only going to go up. They're not going to go down over the next year.
Most likely. I'm not thrilled about postponing it, but I think that's the prudent thing to do.
Rich, I was curious, something you just said. So the rest of the park is zone P right now?
Mm-hmm.
But under the existing P zonings, if we just rezone this to P under the existing P zoning, we still couldn't do this project?
No, under the P zone, we could, under the R zone that it's sitting in right now.
But you said you wanted to go through the whole process of, because I'm, just to make sure I understand this, it's not just the rezone, it's rewriting the P zone, which
Right.
is...
Right.
So...
Which we're going to do anyway.
So, but are we saying that we have to hold up doing this until we finish rewriting the P zone? Or could you just rezone it to the existing, what the existing P zone is?
Yes.
Like you do of the rest of...
You could do that.
Yeah, I was going to say that our intent was to work on the P-zone amendments for the thrift shop separately from the other P-zone amendments that we'll be working on next year.
So what you're saying is you would go ahead with actually starting the rezone process without worrying about the
code text
amendments?
It would be all together.
No, that's...
No, he's talking about the time. Scott, what he's suggesting is, should we do the rezone from R 8.4 to P?
Right.
Start that process soon, and then when we get to the writing of the code text for the P zone, which is going to go through the public process first half of next year, then that will apply to this property.
But in the meantime, you've rezoned it based upon the existing code, which I think you just said, or someone just said, that we could go forward with this development under the existing P code, P-zoned language.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, and so you're saying how many months to rezone the property? Because that,
We're estimating it's 6 to 8 months.
really?
Is that what we did this with the fire station? It didn't take that long.
This
Shouldn't take that long.
We can make it go faster than that.
Well, couldn't you docket it now and get it done this year?
It is. So it's all teed up, ready to go as soon as you give the okay to proceed with
Isn't
it.
this exactly the process we did with the fire station?
Yeah,
Right. So you could make a decision on this before the end of this calendar year?
Well, early next year, but I don't know exactly the timing. They'd have to sit down and work out the number of weeks, the required stuff, but it can go much faster than.
Oh, does it have to go to the planning commission and come back to us?
Yes.
Okay. So then this slide says second quarter 2014. So if it gets done, as Mike said, potentially by the end of this year, and you get your design done, we could, I mean, my only concern is stringing out the issuance of the bonds. It's just...
Same concern. I was just hoping, let's say they can turn it around in 2 to 3 months, okay? Ideally, we'd like to have then 3 more months of show me that you can keep doing it. And that's why I was expecting from this point in time now, 6 to 7 months out. So the beginning of the second quarter of next year. That was my thinking.
But then you're asking us to already commit in the next bullet point, to commit $110,000 when what you just said suggests you're not even necessarily convinced that this project pencils out.
There's interest rate risk. Absolutely.
No, that's not what I just said. I mean, what you just said is you want to see what the YFS can do in terms of revenues, and which I interpreted to mean that you're questioning whether the whole project is viable. But then you're going to ask us now to approve $110,000 to go forward with design. So I guess,
Dan, before you go any further, the first thing you need to do is ask Cindy and Suzanne, can they fix the revenue problem, the staffing issue, the hiccup that we think we've seen? Do we believe, what confidence do we have that we can get back to pretty close to the trajectory we were on?
Yeah, we have confidence that we can do that. We know the factors that go into it, we know what we need to research, and we know how to get back on track, so we have confidence that we'll do that.
Based on that, what I urge the staff to do is to recommend tonight to go towards final design, get working on it, keep this project in its momentum, come back to you when it's time to get authorization to go to bid, check in with the staff on how well have they been doing on revenues, did they fix the staffing issue, what is the projection, and what is the architect's estimate of the cost of the project, what is CHIP's financial plan, and then you make those financing decisions then. You will always have, at that moment, one choice is either wait a little bit longer, tell the staff and the architect go back and find some way to cut the project. I mean, that will be the decision point. I think there are 2 key decision points in this project. One is tonight to set the project scope, and one is about 5 or 6 months later, whatever you say, when we come to authorization to go to bid, and you decide we're going to go to bid and this is how we're going to finance it. And in between, we get some staff work to work out on the operations side.
Okay, Tana?
I would like to move to direct staff to bring back an appropriation request to the council to move forward with the final design phase of the project.
Second.
I'd like to make a comment about that.
Before you, so I'm curious, so you actually wanted, because you've got a number here already, so I'm unclear what motion you plan on coming back
What I
with.
wanted to say to you, to give you the option, if you just wanted to make that appropriation right now, you could.
We still need to come back with them authorizing an architectural services agreement.
I agree with that. But
So you can either do the appropriation then, when we've negotiated a contract with the architect.
Yeah, the 110 number is based on a discussion I had with our architects on this project, asking them what's a real number, if the council wanted to move faster tonight.
I don't think you have to.
But we don't have a firm proposal yet.
You don't have to appropriate a specific amount tonight. We can come back, seek a dollar amount appropriation, and have a proposed architectural agreement to get authorized on. And do that as quickly as we can.
Okay, so Mike, you wanted to talk to the motion?
All right, thank you. Well, the motioner speaks first.
Speak first.
Thanks, Mike, as the motioner. I'd like to obviously speak towards, to this motion. The thrift shop and Mercer Island Youth and Family Service are very iconic for Mercer Island, and it sets us apart as a community and as a city from others, because we've expressed as a city that our values, and we put our money where our values are, that we believe in families and in the people and the residents and the health of our island. And I really think that that's why we support as a city, with city dollars, youth and family services. And at the listening session, some of the comments that we heard were some questions about the city making a profit off the expanded thrift shop revenue. And I just really wanted to articulate to everybody why we're even talking about the thrift shop expansion. And that is because we do, Youth and Family Services does provide amazing services. And just quickly, school supplies, children's holiday program, holiday meals are just some of the extra programs. But this past year, 120 families made 1,200 visits to the food bank. There was a 33% increase in rent and housing cost subsidies, and a 41% increase in families who had utility assistance. And over 310, more than 310 people were served in counseling. And again, those are just some of the services that Mercer Island Youth and Family Services provides. So as we're expanding the thrift shop, what we're really doing is expanding revenue so we can expand and support youth and family services. So I just don't want that mission to get lost while we're talking about this expansion. I think the expansion is great. I've been involved with the Youth and Family Service Foundation, and we've had lots of conversations of how to expand the thrift shop. And this went from relocating it to another downtown area, to using the old recycling center, to tearing down and rebuilding a whole new thrift shop to what it is in this iteration. And I think we've arrived at a really great place that is goes to the nature and the character of the thrift shop, at how it is. And I think it's also going to provide actually some benefits to the park as it removes the dumpsters. If you actually really go there and you look at the entrance to the park and to the thrift shop, it is really dumpster heavy right there. So I think this will be, will actually be an improvement. And I'm excited by this project, so I fully support it.
Mike?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I agree. Matter of fact, I could take that list if you would give it to me, and I'd read down all the great things that Youth and Family Services do to our community, for our community. And it's just these type of things that I don't want to jeopardize. And I think if we don't make a smart business decision on this remodel, then we jeopardize the good things that the YFS does to our community. I think there's quite a bit of risk in this remodel. Is something broken, first of all? No, nothing is broken. This is a situation where nothing is broken. And to Suzanne and Cindy's credit, for the whole community to understand, the numbers on the thrift store the last 5 years or so are just amazing. I think there was 1 year where you jumped 38% or something like that. Just amazing what they've done there. But that kind of goes against their argument here and going forward. They've done a fantastic job, but at some point, you know, even Microsoft, they used to go forever. Fantastic growth that could never stop. But, well, yes, it does, eventually that type of growth does stop. And I think that you've certainly identified the low fruit, probably some of the fruit that's not even low. And you're certainly, it's going to be tougher to bring those type of increases. And maybe that which the last quarter is a little bit of a foreshadow of the more difficult times going ahead. And then compound that with the uncertainty and the risk associated with tolling, if tolling happens. I mean, I am against tolling more than anybody else, or as much as anybody else, but I'll be the first to admit, I truly believe it's a 50-50 proposition. It's 50-50 whether FHWA will admit it. And if tolling hits, then this pro forma is just completely, will not be valid at all. At all. In which case, you know, if growth, this 450,000 is about a 33% increase. So if instead of doing a 33% increase in revenue, you only do an 18%, heaven forbid, an 18%, then my rough calculations say that we go negative in 2017 and toward 1.3 million in the hole by 2022. And then that truly does, that's the type of stuff that concerns me and that we're risking and that jeopardizes. So I am not going to, and I'm just reiterating my last stance, so I'm consistent from that perspective. I am not going to vote to proceed forward. I think certainly we've got uncertainty there with the last quarter. We've got uncertainty with interest. Actually, there's no uncertainty with interest. We know for certain that interest rates will go up. And third, there's a huge uncertainty with reference to tolling. I will do everything I can to stop tolling, but the reality is that it's a probability. It's something that could happen, and we don't want to approve a project that isn't broken with the potential that if A happens, which it could happen, then these numbers just tank.
Comments? Debbie?
I'm just going to put my unequivocal support behind this project. I think based on the scrutiny done by the staff, the input from the community, and I think the work done up here by council, that it is a prudent remodel and expansion, if one might call it an expansion. I think there's also some additional benefits that come to the neighborhood potentially. I'm really pleased to hear that there's a baseline traffic study going on. I think that will give us insight in many different ways. I can appreciate the concerns that you have. You don't want to risk a good thing. But also looking at those numbers, it seems to me that there should be very little concern about actually covering the carrying cost of the debt, let alone what we're actually hoping for, which is the increase in services to expand youth and family services, as well as some leeway within the general fund. So for so many reasons, and based on what I think is some pretty comprehensive comment, input, and consideration, I'm going to give my full support.
Jane?
I too am going to give this my full support. When you think that Youth and Family Services Thrift Store started from a once-a-month garage sale in a little bitty garage probably 50 years ago, and it's become a wonderful resource, a source of funding for our youth and family services. The thrift store is just an amazing resource. It depends on the volunteers. I think we should, I'm glad we're including the space to make it a pleasant workplace for the volunteers. If you think about it, it was remodeled at one time, and then we had our first design was much larger. We scaled it back. It's still an old building. It's in the same location. I think relocating the drop-off is a good idea, and I'm hoping it will indeed be screened for the neighborhood, and it will create a much more pleasing front door for the facility. We'll also gain restrooms for the park, which are very much needed. So I think it's a wonderful, sensible, it's not extravagant, it's still a funky old building, and I think there's a charm to shopping for used stuff in a funky old building, but it's going to be larger. We'll be able to sell more, so Youth and Family Services can get more from the thrift shop revenue. So I'm enthusiastic.
Mike, did you have anything?
I do, thank you, Dan. I will give my tentative support to this, and underline tentative because I share Mike's concern on the tolling issues. So if there's a way, Chip, that we could do a sensitivity analysis on that when you come back to us the next time with some revenue forecasts, I think that would be prudent and certainly information that we could use as we move forward with our tolling issue. Because that is a market concern, I know. The additional point, though, that I want to add on to what Tana brought up with Youth and Family Services that many people forget, and I've had forgotten until I had kids participate in the program again, are the programs for kids in our school district to volunteer not only throughout the year, but certainly during the summertime. And that to me is huge because it gets to the morale issue, it gets to the volunteer recruitment issue, not only now but well into the future, and that we're growing future volunteers. And we're doing that by using money from the thrift store. Essentially, the thrift store is creating potential future volunteers for the thrift stores. So to what extent we can continue that do loop is a good thing, not only for the thrift store, but certainly for the kids that are going through the program. And it branches out into all parts of the neighborhood as well as in the region. So, my kids have, been serving dinners and lunches in downtown Seattle and going places where their mom isn't particularly comfortable, but I am. And all at the end of the day, creating future leaders that really are enhancing our neighborhood as well as our region for the right things. So to that extent, I'm willing to take a little bit of risk, but I do want to make sure that we're going in with both eyes open in terms of what the projected revenue and market conditions are. But again, Cindy, you guys do so many great things. To what extent we can reward you and particularly reward volunteers, like a small multi-purpose room, for God's sakes, we should be doing that. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Tana?
Sorry, and thanks, Mike. I did leave off quite a few services that Youth and Family Services does, and I just wanted to reiterate one more, which is the school counselors. And that's really funded by Youth and Family Services, including drug and alcohol prevention counselors in the middle and the high school. So there are definitely so many services that Youth and Family Services does, and some I left out, and that one being key, as well as school counselors.
The hardest thing about playing mayor is that you get to speak last. I'm so not used to that. No, yes, they're all right. No, I will also vote for the motion. I'll make a couple of comments, though. First, the list of services that Tana and Mike Grady have already spoken to are huge. They make a big difference in our community. I think when you look at the numbers that are in the spreadsheet that was in the agenda bill, you realize that that we need to continue to grow in order to meet the ongoing needs of funding those services. And clearly, we are going to reach a point with the existing facility where we will not be able to grow any further. I mean, that's part of what you do in any kind of business growth cycle, is that eventually you hit the limitations that the space within which you're working force upon you, and this will enable us to hopefully continue growing at least for another couple of decades, and maintain the type of growth that we've been able to achieve. So I think this is essential if we're going to grow as we need to continue growing, and in doing so being able to fund services. On the tolling issue, I understand what both Mike Ciro and Mike Grady have referred to. I'm concerned about that also, but I also know that we cannot sit still as a community and just let the tolling freeze everything we're going to do, because I've got the feeling that tolling is going to be hanging over our head for quite a while as we work through this. And if we just stop everything we're doing, then we've really lost. So I think we need to move forward, and I think if tolling does happen, which I'm convinced we can stop, but if I'm wrong and it does happen, then we will figure out a way to adapt to it, and not only this aspect of our community, but other aspects. But the bottom line is we cannot stop functioning as a community because of what could happen down the road. So I will support this, and as everyone else says, thank staff for some excellent work on this. I will mention one last point. Like we did with the fire station, I am hopeful that as staff works its way through the design process, it'll touch base back with the council and give us a chance to see what you're doing. What was nice about the fire station, there was a check-in with staff came in, and we were able to move things around a little bit, so we avoided a problem that you spent a whole bunch of money on a design which would have been problematic. And I trust, just to, for example, deal with some of the aesthetic issues that have been raised tonight by the public, as well as been raised by the public throughout this process, check in with us, because I don't surprise the council and don't surprise the public with a final design and said, now we can't change it anymore.
Yeah, we certainly can do that. And we'll keep the square footage down to 7,999 square feet.
Could you put that in the minutes, Ally, please? Okay, yes.
I just also want to thank the neighborhood and the community around the thrift shop. I mean, the fact that they are so supportive of the thrift shop is really another testament to that neighborhood and to the community. So thank you very much. And I hope as we're reaching out and starting to develop and look at that baseline for the traffic, that we don't necessarily, if we find that there is a problem, that we don't necessarily wait until that 2016 date when the thrift shop is done to make those changes, but that we bring back that to the council to move forward as quickly as possible, whether or not we've moved forward on the thrift shop.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor, or pending. You all see it in the, I don't have to read it again. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Nay.
Vote is 5-1. Motion carries. Thank you, staff. Anything else you need from us on this topic?
We're good, thanks.
Great. Okay, we're going to take, yes, we're going to take a break, and
This will be the medium restroom, not the unisex, and not the Cadillac.
it's 9:11 now. Let's reconvene at 9:20.
cue video.
Oh, my God.
Do we have to wait till 9:20? I have to wait.
Oh, I got another water there.
That's right.
Oh, don't ask. I got 2 minutes. I'm going to stay on them.
Not on enough drugs.
You already cued the video?
Uncue video.
Yeah, I'm purposely off drugs during the
I
day
can
so I
crack,
don't
I'm
get
the
goofy.
best back cracker, Dan. Dan,
What?
I can crack a great back.
Oh, right.
It'll start at the base of your back and go right up to the neck.
Right.
Trust me.
Trust you.
Trust me on that.
Yeah.
Able acupuncture on the island.
Mike, when's the next home dive meet?
My girls aren't diving this year.
Olivia's not diving?
Neither one of them, yeah.
Oh, I was gonna take on.
I know.
Does she have time to teach?
What's that?
Does she have time to teach?
Did Ellie?
Yes. She's not doing any sport this season. So
Okay,
absolutely
so
she
father
has time.
support, encouragement, because I have actually 3 girls. Lined up who wanna,
No, I would welcome that,
okay.
kind of an idle mind a bit right
Oh.
now.
Actually, the truth be known, her name was batted around at the Shore Club about whether the Shore Club should reach out to her.
All right.
Okay, guys, it's 20 after. Let's go.
So you're supportive?
Okay, you can cue us up again, Ellie.
Okay.
Oh, wonderful. Welcome. Great. Okay, that's good to know that. We're back in session. We're now on Agenda Bill 4866, and Rich, I believe you wanted to speak to that first.
Yeah, before we dive into this, I have spent some time with about half of you in talking about concerns. And this, I think, is an outgrowth of what you saw 2 weeks ago in the agenda bill and the presentations, and comparing it to what you saw in the current materials. And just some serious questions about, well, what happened to the 600,000, for example? It's a different number now. And I concluded that this sort of sense of, I'm not sure I understand what's going on here, and I'm not sure I trust the numbers, has given me enough pause to suggest, instead of going through this agenda bill tonight, we table it. In the meantime, I go back with the staff and with our consultant team from FCS to do a bit of a separate assessment of the data, analysis, call it an audit. I'm not sure that it's really an audit, but it's a recheck, and then have FCS come back and tell us what is the right number for us to project into the future for permit fee recovery, and what systems, if any, have they identified within the city about tracking and capturing data that produces a responsible, defensible recoverability number. And then come back to you, have this all done in time for your mid-biennial budget, where we'll have a resolution for setting fees for next year. I recommend this because I sense that there's there's not the trust levels that I'm accustomed to, and that I think we need to have between the council and the staff. And I want to rebuild that before you even dive into this. So,
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I move that we table this till the mid-biennial budget.
Second.
Okay. And that's, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, tabling motion is not debatable, or?
You can set it over to a date certain too, if that's what you prefer to do.
I set it over to an event, so.
Well, the mid, okay.
November.
No, you don't have to. It's just as valid to do it to an event as the city manager suggested.
Let's do a date.
Well, the motion is what it is. I mean, I'll just put a little bit more context in this thing. I think what Rich said is very accurate, that this is so dramatically different from what we heard 2 weeks ago that it's the type of thing that now requires going back and making sure we verify it. I will relate just a little bit of my own conversation with Rich, that I felt that this needed to, that we needed to have our outside consultants actually do more of the research on this thing, and rather than rely, because staff was saying one thing 2 weeks ago and something different now, that to have the outside consultant really dig into this and make sure we get as objective a review of this as we can. The one other thing I suggested to Rich is that both reviews have been based upon a 2012 data set. So we don't just continue looking at the same numbers again and yet come up with potentially a third number based on the 2012. I've strongly suggested we ask our consultants to look at a 2013 data set, which obviously we have at this point, and therefore we don't end up having to have on the record 3 sets of different numbers for what's supposed to be the same time period.
Mr. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, I mentioned this possibility to our consultants out in the hallway, and I'm not sure that they would leap to your conclusion that the 2013 set necessarily is the right next step. What I'd urge you to do is let's let them decide what's the right next step in which data to be working from to get the most meaningful and defensible product. I don't think they want to have us spend money on them to produce something that's not going to make a difference. They need to dive into it a little bit. I'd say just let them judge which data they need to be looking at to give us the answer that we're looking for. I'm looking for wiggle room here, because I'm not sure they think that that's the right next step.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. I just, from a legal standpoint, to have 3 different reports on the same set of data, to me, is really troubling. If I'm trying to defend that later on.
We'll assess that concern. I mean, that we'll look into that and get an assessment of that concern from a legal point of view.
From another legal point of
view. Actually, we're going to go to an engineer instead of an attorney.
Yeah, just don't go to a statistician.
Okay, so there's a motion that's been made. Anyone else, since, even though it may not be debatable, I've already said something, so if anyone else would like to comment, they're welcome to comment on it. Okay.
I'm just glad that you raised it, because I was going to raise it just based on the conflicting data, so thank you.
And I didn't talk to anyone, and I was, the last couple of days, looking at this, and then I went back to the old numbers, and I was totally confused.
We lost everybody.
And I was thinking, how are they going to explain these differences on every, so I just couldn't quite imagine.
It is now officially unanimous. We lost everybody.
It was 100% failure.
Yeah. So that's good. So there's a motion on the floor. Ally, you have the motion?
Yes.
Is that a yes or is that a yes?
Yeah, I mean, if you put something on the table, you're not supposed to debate that motion. If you postpone something indefinitely, then you can debate that motion.
Well, we have the motion, whether we should have debated or not, the motion is that we table it to the mid-biennial financial budget review, which presumably is November sometime.
Actually, what I'm going to do, I should have spoke up. I'm not going to, I wasn't preparing to follow that schedule. I was going to bring something, an interim step on either the 21st or the 4th, and then bring a final resolution for the mid-biennial. So just let me manage this one. Just don't pin me down on the dates. Except mid-biennial budget, we're going to have a fee resolution.
I think what the motion was by the mid-biennial review.
that's
I
what
think
I
that's
heard.
what I recall.
We're just trying to say that the proper motion is to postpone either to a date certain or postpone indefinitely. That's
There's
what the
nothing
message.
improper to do it the way I did it with an event, to an event.
Okay, so the motion's proper or improper has been made, and but we know what the result of it will be is that we will get this coming back to us sometime by November something.
Yes.
Okay. So all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries 6-0. Okay, where are we?
You're at the end of the meeting, and now you got to start working on planning schedule and other things.
Okay. So, other business, council member absences. I guess I would entertain a motion to excuse the mayor from not being here tonight?
I move that we-
Yeah, I'm sorry. Move to excuse Mr. Bruce Bassett.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, are there any, right now, the other absences that are planned is Jane is going to be gone for 3 meetings, one with the school board and 2 regular meetings. Anyone else has absences between now and the end of the year that they're aware of?
Oh, let's see, October 21, that's, what is that?
It's now October 22nd, it's been changed to.
Right.
Yeah, just so, that was, I think everyone's aware that the meeting on the 21st, because of the Sound Transit meeting here, will now be moved to the 22nd. Okay, so are there any other absences that people are aware of? Okay, that's done. Planning schedule. Mike, you at one point, and I had
Yes,
emailed the
thank you.
council on a point that I have also, but why don't you go first?
Yes, I would ask the council to have staff bring up this marijuana, bring up a potential marijuana moratorium agenda, or 1 and 2, yeah. And the reason I say that, I was reading The Stranger the other day, of all magazines. What a fine piece of literature that is.
You know, when you put on your sunglasses, you become a different person.
Was that after you read Real Change?
And so they, unbeknownst to me, there's almost, it seemed like there were about a dozen communities that have a moratorium on the marijuana permitting process. So I think it's very important, as the one, I guess Ann talked about, is getting ahead on this, because I guarantee you the businessmen, the fine businessmen out there are looking to
Business
exploit.
persons, not businessmen.
Business persons are looking to exploit and get a toehold on the island for a marijuana shop. So I would like to see that on the agenda very quickly.
So just before we decide whether we're going to do that, Katie, can you give us some idea of what that means to put that on the agenda?
Well, I guess the first question to ask is, I think it won't happen by the end of the year, from my understanding and what's currently on the planning calendar. But the other piece of it, I think that's important, is that
We won't be able to do it
No,
for
what
the
she's
end of the
saying-
year, or the state won't be able to do
No,
it?
the state, there won't be any licenses issued prior to the end of the year. The second piece of that, too, is that based upon our zoning, our understanding is that there is no area that a marijuana establishment could go into. So I would just ask.
We have a de facto moratorium.
Exactly. And then, because the point of the moratorium would be to consider what other elements you'd want to see in your zoning regulations to prevent it. Because we have a de facto moratorium, it's not allowed in town center. Yeah, I think you certainly have the ability to.
Even if you do the moratorium process, given the fact we've already got a de facto moratorium, don't we almost invite public testimony to open up our zoning?
Correct.
So
That would be the issue.
Can you, by the next meeting, at least confirm to us whether the 1,000 feet as the crow flies effectively is a we'll borrow any site in Mercer Island?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we'll have that.
They're
worked
finishing
out
them out, we
within the
can do
week,
that.
yeah.
Mike, would that be sufficient for the moment?
Yeah, so what I understand is you're going to show us the map where that 400-foot sliver is?
It's in the middle of the street.
And that's all, I just want to see it.
But even the sliver, Scott was showing me on Friday, the sliver goes away because the Montessori school.
Oh, that's right, that's right.
So there is no place on Mercer Island you can do it, even in the middle of Southeast 77th.
Not only, I'm sorry. Okay, not only because of what the initiative says, but also because of federal law with regard to drug activities within a certain school area of a school
Yeah,
zone.
the feds are driving this 1,000-foot rule now.
May I suggest, Mike, if it's okay with you, that we add to the October 7th agenda just a presentation by staff of the map so that we have that as a...
Yeah, that's very, Deputy Mayor, that's very, that's sufficient. I think that'll pay dividends for our community also. I think there are a lot of questions, a lot of concerns out there, so.
Okay, so if we can add to the October 7th agenda just 15 minutes or whatever you think is appropriate, Rich, for just presenting us the map so then the community can see that, that would be great.
Good.
The subject I had raised over the weekend to the council is this question that we've already talked about before, is the issue of the center roadway, and the reason it was triggered over the weekend, and I didn't raise it with Bruce before he left, was because I believe it was Friday, I heard again on the radio, I was so surprised, Sound Transit, someone from Sound Transit saying that basically the light rail project would begin in 2016, was right on schedule, and it would begin in 2016 on the center roadway of I-90. And so that was clear that they hadn't backed off. And then when I asked Rich about that on Friday or Saturday, he confirmed that he had just actually gotten a communication from Sound Transit essentially saying the same thing, that they're still on track to do something in 2016, although they're now talking about the end of 2016 rather than the beginning of 2016, but still 2016. So at least in my mind, that really suggested that we need to go back and re-engage with Sound Transit and WashDOT on this issue, because and I don't want to put words into Rich's mouth, but we have several issues hitting us at once. It's sort of the trifecta of tolling the loss of the center roadway for potentially 7 years, and the loss of bus transit because of the funding issues. So, and of the three, I absolutely consider the most immediate threat right now to be the loss of the center roadway, because that's, once they shut that down, it's gone for 7 years. So that's the reason I put it before the council, whether we want to go back and have and ask staff to re-engage with WashDOT and Sound Transit to get them back here, so we can talk about it, and not with a view towards sitting there, having them sit in front of us so we can scream at them, but we need to come up with a process to have some constructive engagement with them on how to go forward with this. And we really, whether that starts out with staff first meeting with them, or with Bruce, and maybe myself as deputy mayor meeting with Sound Transit, I don't know what it is, but I feel we need to have more discussion with this here.
Totally agree with you, Dan, and I thank you for your allowing some thought around what is the next step and under what forum. I would recommend, I've been thinking about it, I'd like to get a meeting with Bruce and Dan and Joni Earl, the Director of Transportation of King County, and Fred Jarrett, and then the WashDOT staff on the project in a row. We are negotiating on 2 of those 3 triple whammies. We're in negotiations on 2 out of 3 of them. And the third is, we haven't negotiated what the schedule is on the center roadway, and that's what I think Dan's most interested in. I'm afraid if we just go out without thinking of the impacts on the other 2 negotiations, by bringing this topic up, we may affect them. I think we need to get all the players in the room and say, we're about to get the trifecta, and you guys signed an agreement to address our mobility issues. Now, the rubber's meeting the road, let's now talk. And I think we need to talk about all three issues at the same time. So, I think we need our leadership from the council to get eyeball to eyeball with these folks, and it's not just about staff anymore. But let's find out what they're going to say in that meeting before you bring them out here. Yeah, let's give them some room to let their hair down and show us what wiggle room they have, and let's be pretty strong. And I think now's the time to play the card.
But since this is a discussion of planning session, I feel very strongly that we got to get back before the full council, definitely before the end of the year. So we can have that meeting now, as you proposed, but we need to get something on this planning schedule to, because if there's only one meeting in December, then we're into.
Well, I have an agreement with Sound Transit that we're going to get back to you, it's not on here, but get back to you with the Sound Transit term sheet on parking in November, and it's probably going to have to be the 4th. So that it may end up having to be at the same time. So.
Somewhere we need to get it on. So, is there any objection to that?
No.
Okay.
Great idea.
Okay. Okay, any other comments on the planning session, on the planning schedule?
Yeah, I've got a couple. The DSG fees, as we just discussed, I'm either going to put it on the 21st or the 4th. I'll have to just do some meeting balancing here, particularly in light of what we just said. Everything else, I think, is in order. We have the SMP calendared for coming back on the 22nd, and I think we're doing pretty well from what I'm hearing from Katie and Scott. We may not need, well, I guess we'll have to do a first reading, second reading, but anything, Katie, you want to add to it?
I think we're doing well. I think
we're doing okay.
Okay, I just, looking at all the things that are items to be scheduled and looking what you got ahead, the nice thing about December this year, December 16th happens to be early in the month. So if you do have to schedule a meeting the 16th, it's probably not the end of the world, because from a vacation schedule or school schedule. So you should be thinking about whether you're going to need something on the 16th.
Well, okay, we'll certainly look at that. On the other items to be scheduled, almost all that stuff is stuff to get pushed off to 2014, and a lot of it's just because we've just got more on our plate. I-90 did a lot of that.
Yeah. Okay. Board appointments, as always, I have at least 10 or 15 of them, but I left them at home, unfortunately. Council member reports.
Sorry, Dan.
Oh, you've got.
Yeah, board appointments. I just wanted to mention that the Sound City Association has a number of committees, and just about now they're starting to look for committee members from various committees. So I will share more about that with people, and just so that you know. So that's coming up, and I think deadlines are early November, or mid-November. So just if you're interested in some Sound City Association type appointment, let me know.
Talking about appointments, I think we at least should acknowledge a rather recent appointment, to the state legislature of our own town of Sen. So, council member and state representative reports. Mike, we'll start at you. Mike, we'll start at your end.
Well, I just want to thank our police and fire for being at the triathlon. They didn't have to save me this year, so thank you. Thanks for being there.
Is he still there?
No. Debbie?
I would thank them for being at the swim, and they didn't have to save me either, although I made sure they knew that I was there.
Good for you.
No, they did a great job, as usual. It was very well run, both by the contribution of the city and obviously the event organization team.
Jane?
I attended a meeting on September 10th that the Parks Department ran about the plans for upgrading 3 areas, one Calkins Landing, the other Calkins Point at Luther Burbank Park, and then the South Shore area between the dock and the fishing pier. It was really interesting. They got some comments from neighbors, and the good thing is the Calkins Landing refurbishing will be done entirely by grant money, and they'll be taking out the steps going down, and they showed plans for all that. It's at 70% design now, and construction will start in October. And the funding isn't in place for the other two, but they've got partial plans. Also, if you look at the Mercer Island Reporter website and the issue coming out on Wednesday, there's a big article about Kenton Pies, the 81-year-old sculptor who's working on the dragon. And it's 45 feet long and 6 feet tall. It's going to be much taller, and you'll be able to, the kids will be able to like walk through the nose and the mouth of this dragon. Anyway, he's working on it now in sections and looking to install in late October. So, well, from what I understand, the Parks Department, they're gonna demolish most of the old dragon, but keep the head of the old dragon in the woods, kind of just in there. So, yeah, well, maybe we can get you a paw. I don't know. Anyway, it's coming along, and really a cool story about the sculptor.
Tanner?
I just want to again encourage people to come to the transportation listening session tomorrow night in Bellevue. That's really going to inform the Senate on transportation needs in our area, and I think this is a great opportunity for us to get out there and make our views known. So I hope people will come to that. And
can you give the exact location and date? I mean,
it's from 6 to 9 at Stevenson Elementary.
And Deputy Mayor Grouse, I think, is going to have a speaking part.
Yeah.
And Deputy Mayor Grouse will be speaking, testifying on behalf of Mercer Island.
What is the format for that speaking? What's that?
I don't know.
I assume we'll find out.
We'll find out. All I know is our lobbyist consultant has found out and assures us that Mercer Island, through its deputy mayor, will have a opportunity to speak.
Citizens, we don't know whether they sign up on a list, or?
I don't know how that works. I don't know.
It's 3 hours long, and so I don't, well, I was going to comment on that, but why don't you go ahead and do it?
I'd just like to say the crosswalks, the new improved crosswalks, a very efficient, looks like a very efficient design that are more obvious in the in-floor. They really look good, and they look so efficient. It looks like it wouldn't cost a lot of money to really put those things all over the place. The crosswalks that were changed from the in-road stuff to the up on the pole.
So just on Island Crest.
Island Crest.
Last year.
Microphones, please.
I thought you did. No, it hasn't been that long.
This summer.
Okay. Okay. Couple of things. I attended. First, Bruce attended a meeting last week with the EPA Regional Administrator, Dennis McLaren.
And I did.
And Rich was there, so maybe you should talk to what happened in the meeting more than I should.
We met with Dennis McLaren and his one of his staff people that's on NEPA. Bill Chapman was also with us. Bill did a lot of the presentation. We were asking EPA to engage in the I-90 tolling environmental study in a participating agency role, and to provide comments on the scoping of the NEPA study. And the results of it sort of mixed. I think they're going to write a scoping letter. We'll wait to see if they go beyond that. They're crying like just every other federal agency about the sequester, and they're just maxed out with work projects and other big ticket NEPA participating agency commitments that they made and no money to do it with. So we'll see, but I think they acknowledge the issues. I think we made our case about the potential for air quality degradation from congestion, and that this is going to be a statewide issue. I think they get it. I think they'll at least write a scoping letter, and we'll see what happens after that.
And I also attended a meeting last week that was organized by the county executive, Dow Constantine, at which in attendance were several county council members, Seattle City Council members, other regional council members from other cities, as well as organized labor, industry, and a whole slew of other interest groups talking about funding of transportation. And part of their emphasis was to make sure that the message to the senators who are on the listening tour, as well as our other representatives in Olympia, was that we have a transportation funding emergency out there, and that somehow that has got to be dealt with in terms of making sure there are sufficient resources available to meet transportation requirements. And obviously the emphasis of the meeting was the Puget Sound area, and I advised people of obviously the concerns of Mercer Island in terms of tolling and making sure there's funding for the 520 bridge, which doesn't include tolling. So, and that's a point that I will reemphasize tomorrow at the Senate listening tour. So, but it was an interesting meeting. That this is going to be an organized effort. They've already started raising money. They've hired a coordinator. They've hired a campaign coordinator, and so it's all in anticipation of a special session of the legislature coming up before the end of the year, where they're going to be pushing for funding. So that's, if there's any other business, Donna.
Wonky microphone. I just wanted to just say quickly that I'm, from your announcement about being a state rep, that I'm extremely honored and grateful for the support to become the state rep for this area, and that I'm so excited, particularly as we're discussing these transportation issues. While we're up here, we feel like we have, we can really influence it, but we can't make a decision, and I feel like I'm excited to take our cause and the knowledge of all this transportation business that we're discussing and bring that to Olympia and bring that perspective. So I'm looking forward to representing this area and the broader 41st on lots of these issues, but just wanted to really say how excited I am, and thank you so much for everyone's support.
For voting for you. Okay, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, we're adjourned. God, that was fun.